Council, if we can have your attention, please. I'd like to thank all of our media partners for broadcasting tonight's meeting and reporting on it. We have a number of delegations here with us tonight, so Madam Clerk, let's get this meeting in order.
Under Agenda Item 1, I have a motion by Councillors Butland and Krampotic, resolved that the minutes of the regular Council meeting of January 9, 2017 and budget meeting of December 5, 2016 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
Under Agenda Item 3, Declaration of Pecuniary Interest, I don't have any.
Councillor Turco?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 6.11, 6.12, bylaw enforcement officers, any relative bylaws with that, a spouse employed by police services.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.4, retention of restructuring lawyer. My firm's involved in some of the CCAA litigation.
Thank you. Councillor Krampotic?
Yeah, item 6.4, retention of restructuring lawyer fee update. I'm involved with the steelworkers and also an employee of SR Algoma.
Any other conflicts, Council? Seeing none?
Under Agenda Item 4, I have a motion by Councillors Christian and Krampotic, resolved that the agenda and addendum number 1 for January 23, 2017 City Council meeting as presented be approved. And I would point out that Agenda Item 7.1.1, changes to municipal legislation, is going to be postponed to February 6th.
7.1.1 is postponed to February 6th?
That's correct.
Okay, otherwise, a motion to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor? Carried.
Under Agenda Item 5.1, Bonsu 2017, Rebecca Miller, President of the Bonsu Board of Directors, is in attendance.
Welcome to Council. You do not look like Rebecca Miller.
I am not Rebecca Miller. I'm speaking on behalf of our president, who is at home in bed with the flu. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. It is our pleasure to be here this evening. Bonsu is a very special event that for the last 54 years has brought our community together outside in the dead of winter to show what it truly means to be a Northerner. And Bonsu 2017 will be no exception. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our great partners and the many volunteers that make Bonsu possible. We have a really fun lineup of events scheduled at our new home at the Machine Shop, where we will celebrate both Bonsu and Canada's 150th. For a complete event listing, please visit our website at bonsu.on.ca, and please also watch for our event program next week. Thank you again and enjoy Bonsu. Since 1964, Bonsu is here for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a proclamation to read. Whereas each year the residents of Sault Ste. Marie await the arrival of Mr. Bonsu in the Ontario Winter Carnival with great enthusiasm. And whereas many local individuals, groups, service clubs, and businesses organize and sponsor a variety of interesting events for everyone, especially families, throughout the 11 days of the carnival. And whereas in order for all citizens and visitors to fully enjoy and reflect the spirit of the carnival, they must be properly attired. And whereas this year celebrates the 54th anniversary of this community winter festival. Now therefore I, Christian Provenzano, by virtue of the power vested in me as mayor of the city of Sault Ste. Marie, request that all citizens and visitors remove their ties and button their collars and wear a Bonsu souvenir during the period February 3rd to 12th and February 20th, which I now proclaim as Ontario Winter Carnival Bonsu season in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. Bonsu is for you. Let it snow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Under Agenda Item 5.2, Youth Homelessness Awareness Month, Mike Nadeau, Chief Administrative Officer for the District of Sault Ste. Marie Social Services Administration Board, is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Mr. Nadeau.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It's a privilege to be back. I've asked Ann Penny, the Executive Director of Pauline's Place, to also help me with this evening's presentation. We're here tonight to talk about an initiative that's going to be happening on Gore Street on February the 1st. We're asking Council if we can close a portion of Gore Street to have a community event to start to raise money and to awareness in an effort to fight and end youth homelessness in the community. Last year, there were 169 different youth members of our community that used Pauline's Place. They stayed there for a total of 1,554 nights, or almost 4 years in calendar years. Rather than me trying to explain the services that Pauline's Place offers, I've asked if we had a video, that if we could just show that, because it's in the words of a former resident who used the service. They've just put their words together, and we've animated their journey.
I don't really think about the future all that often. It's day to day, but I was thinking of going back to see her and telling her what's going on in my life. She'll be pretty proud of me. I know she's proud of me. She's like my mom. Maybe one day I'll find a nice girl and start a family, bring them to meet Anne or whoever's working there. I want them to meet my extended family. I'll bring them to see Pauline's Place because it's my home. I had a bad life growing up. A lot of stuff happened, but I won't get into that. I didn't know my biological mother. My dad tried to get jobs, but always got laid off. My stepmom had a job, but didn't make much money. It was a confusing family. There were 6 kids altogether. The other ones were either through marriage or my dad had them from a previous marriage. I had 2 actual brothers from my dad. I believe I have a half-sister. Same mother, different father. My family was broke all the time, but my parents amazingly had money for beer. I never knew when my next meal would be. There were weeks when I wouldn't eat anything. All I drank was coffee. I was depressed. My home life actually made me depressed because it was so bad. I was fairly close to my grandfather. He was a good guy, made his own wine and awesome pasta sauce. Unfortunately, his recipe died with him. He never gave it away. He died of cancer and his funeral was on my birthday. After that, I don't celebrate my birthdays anymore. Other than him, my home life was nothing. It's just the past and I don't talk to any of them anymore. At 16, a friend told me I could legally leave, so I was like, all right. I packed some stuff and got out of there. Couch surfed for a couple of months, then my older brother told me about Pauline's Place because he went there around my age. So I called and they took me in. They helped me through a lot. You get breakfast, lunch, and supper there. They fatten me up quite a bit. If you're on medication, they keep you on track. I had anxiety and depression, and they got me the treatment I needed. If you tell them what you need when you're staying there, they'll do their best to help you out. They got me on OW and put me in a life skills course. They make you go to school every day. When I was living at home, there were a lot of times that I missed school because of my family situation. I finished it a year late, but I finished. The shelter kept me out of trouble. You can't have alcohol or drugs there. Everyone had chores, and it gave you responsibility. There was a curfew, and if you missed it, you'd have to stay out all night. If you had alcohol on your breath or you were stoned, they sent you to detox. I liked the house and used to stay in all the time. I still don't go out or have many friends. It's just simpler that way. At 19, they moved me into second stage housing. Staff members would come over daily to guide you in the right direction, help if you needed it, or just to talk. We messed everything up, so I couch surfed until I found another place, and then another, until I found my new place. It's tough on your own. One day I was at an intersection and looked both ways. A van came out of nowhere and hit me. I woke up with people all around me. The ambulance and cops said I might have internal bleeding and should go to the hospital. But I don't like hospitals. They creep me out. I said if I felt worse that I would go to the hospital myself. I had a big bruise for a couple of weeks. Anne told me about the STEP program at the YMCA. She forced me to call them. I did and finished 4 weeks of classroom work and then 12 weeks of placement at a job I'm doing now. I'm praying I get this permanently. It's hard to find a job in this town. I'm lucky to have one, although I'm still in Ontario Works because I don't get enough shifts to pay my rent. Even though I don't live at the shelter anymore, I still keep in touch with everyone. I volunteered there off and on for years. I've been on there every day for the past 4 or 5 months just making sure the house is safe, talking to people that stay there. If they're having a rough patch, to just be fresh ears. I've been thinking about going to college, maybe to be a child and youth worker or social worker. Then I could go to Pauline's Place and apply there. Anne said if I go to college and get everything I need, she'll hire me because, she's mom. She loves me. I still talk to the staff about any problems that I've been having. They give me advice and sometimes I stay there for supper or to take a nap. They talk to me like an actual person, not like a counselor. I feel at home and I'm proud to be part of it. I don't care what anyone says. I'd stick up for that place until my face was blue. People who say otherwise just don't know. I know it's still there for me, even just to visit. It's my home.
So, Mr. Mayor and members of council, That's the story of one of the over 2,000 people that have used the shelter since inception. And on February 1st, Joe Roberts is walking across Canada to raise money and awareness to end youth homelessness in this country. Joe is a former homelessness individual, a former addict who has dedicated his life to the cause. So I just ask, I understand we have a proclamation, and I really encourage the community to get behind it.
We do. Thank you, Mr. Nadeau. Whereas youth homelessness is a serious concern in the city of Sault Ste. Marie and across Canada, and whereas youth homelessness is a complex issue that limits young people from being able to secure the basic necessities such as food, clothing, and shelter, it impacts their ability to complete their education, find stable employment, and become a prosperous adult. And whereas Pauline's Place, an emergency short-term housing provider to youth, provided accommodations to 169 individual young people in the city of Sault Ste. Marie over the course of the year 2016. And whereas social service providers in the communities wish to ensure that all youth in Sault Ste. Marie have the opportunity for education, employment, and personal safety, and that services offered to homelessness and at-risk youth are promoted and accessible. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, by virtue of the power vested in me as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim February 2017 as Youth Homelessness Awareness Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and encourage all citizens to support initiatives that work towards the betterment of our youth. I'd like to thank Pauline's Place for all the good work they do. We appreciate you coming here tonight. Before we... Go on, Madam Clerk.
Under Agenda Item 5.3, Black History Month, Jane Amolo, President of the African Caribbean Canadian Association of Northern Ontario, is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, all the councillors. On behalf of ACANO and a few of our representatives who are here with me, I feel honored to be here again, second year in a row, to talk about African Caribbean Canadian Association of Northern Ontario. ACANO was formed in 2011, and it's organized as a not-for-profit, non-political, non-denominational association that seeks to develop, promote, and grow awareness of our cultural heritage while promoting unity in our community. Its objectives include, but are not limited to, bringing together all the residents of Northern Ontario of Black and African and West Indian descent, their families, friends, and alliances, to advance the common interests of all members, to provide a forum for social, cultural, and business networking opportunities, to create an environment for our children and the youth to learn about our diversity, to share our culture and diversity in the community that we live in, to promote and assist with the integration of new Bowie members, to provide mutual aid and assistance as needed, and to connect and build relationships with other community members. Since our inception in 2011, we have partnered with the local immigration partnership, the Sioux Community Career Center, Sioux College, Algoma University. We've also partnered with Bonsu, and this year we have a special partnership with Bonsu. And those of you who are planning to come and join us in our Black History Month, to be a good time and opportunity for us to be together and share many things. Today we are gathered here for yet another very important moment in our ACANO history and that of our community. We extend our warm invitation to all of you to join us in celebrating 2017 Black History Month, Sault Ste. Marie. The height of our celebration will be a special dinner on February 11th. The dinner will be held on Saturday from 5 to 11 p.m. at the Machine Shop located on 83 Huron Street. This will be a great opportunity to showcase and celebrate the achievements and contributions of Black Canadians, as well as share our history, local narratives, poetry readings, cultural music, dance, art exhibits, movies, and fashions, among other exciting activities. The theme for 2017 for our local Black History Month is Unity in Diversity. 150 years of contribution. Our motto is Akano, bringing people together. All of you are welcome. I have posters with me for anybody who is interested. I'll leave them at the end of the bench there. You can grab one so that you can know who to contact if you'd like to have a ticket for the event. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's a really fun event. I went to it last year, and I believe I'll be going to it again this year, and it's a really great event, so I encourage everybody to get out and enjoy it. The event is on February 11th, I believe. Jane, is that correct? February 11th?
Yes.
It's a dinner, and it's at the machine shop starting at 5 o'clock. So I have a proclamation here, Jane. Whereas in December 1995, the House of Commons officially recognized February as Black History Month, following a motion introduced by the first Black Canadian woman elected to Parliament, the Honourable Jean Augustine. And whereas the proud legacy of Black Canadians goes back to the early beginnings of Canadian history, and whereas Black History Month is an opportunity to celebrate the achievements and contributions of Black Canadians, as well as share the history, contributions, and culture of Black Canadians. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, by virtue of the power vested in me as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim February 2017 as Black History Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you, Jane.
Under Agenda Item 5.4, Postpartum Depression Awareness Month, Lindsay Collins is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Ms. Collins.
Thank you very much. I had a son in 2015, and I was diagnosed with postpartum depression and PTSD when he was born. I found it was extremely hard to find help and have the conversation because everybody just didn't really want to have that conversation. So I was hoping to bring it to your attention and bring it to everybody's attention for us just to have the conversation. We didn't choose to not have the bond with our children, so let's just have the conversation. And we are having support groups. I've just started a recent group. It's called Mom's the Word. It's a voice for mothers with postpartum depression. We are having our first meeting Wednesday at Willow Grove at 8 p.m.
So that's this Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for reaching out to the city and asking to do this. I want to commend your courage for coming here and sharing your story and the strength that you show, and really appreciate what you're doing for the community, because I expect a lot of people will reach out to you. And so thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I have a proclamation here, which Lindsay worked on with us. Whereas postpartum depression is a serious illness that affects quality of life of 1 in 8 women and 10% of men. And whereas these effects can impact every culture, age, income level, and race for birth parents and adoptive parents. And whereas the symptoms of postpartum depression vary from person to person, but can include anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, guilt, irritability, anger, difficulty sleeping, feeling disconnected from one's baby, and frightening or intrusive thoughts. And whereas there is no single test to diagnose postpartum depression, education is the best tool to fight postpartum depression, and raising awareness among new parents, educating the public, and reaching out to health practitioners can increase the rate at which afflicted parents get help. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, by virtue of the power vested in me as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim month of January 2017 as Postpartum Depression and Anxiety Awareness Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today.
Under Agenda Item 5.5, Downtown Association Strategic Planning Update, Brian Hayes, Chair, and Josh Ingram, General Manager, in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Mr. Hayes.
Flashbacks.
No kidding.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I will be brief, although it might come across as being long-winded at the beginning. This will be less than 5 minutes. Right now, we are undergoing our strategic planning process. And this is the first major undertaking of our new board, a board that was approved by council in October, with the exception of Moonlight Magic, which was something we were also involved with. And that was an overwhelming success, thanks to the efforts of our manager, Josh Ingram, who's here today, and his volunteers. And that event is a sign of things to come, I assure you. And it was a great partnership with the city. Larry Girardi, you were instrumental in helping us. The CAO was at the event, the mayor was at the event, and there were certain councillors at the event as well. Councillor Turco was there, Councillor Nero, they did some judging for us, and Councillor Hupinen and Councillor Myers were there offering some suggestions and some very good advice, and we thank you very much. I was going to say offering some criticism, but that wouldn't be appropriate. And Councillor Romano, of course, was there in his role as interim chair of the board prior to my taking over the board. And I do want to thank the interim board. As you know, we've been in transition. So the interim board, Joe Biscelia, Frank Giaconi, Paul Skornianki, Grace Terdico, and Ross Romano were the interim board that brought us to this point, and we're at a very good point right now, I would suggest. And Ross, thank you for your efforts, and thank you for relinquishing the chairmanship. It was something that I was interested in undertaking, and I didn't have to fight Ross too hard on it. Also, we have some new members to the board, and I do want to recognize them. The interim board has remained, by the way. We have some new members, Christy Siastro, Angela Romano, and Rory Ring. Rory, you'll be familiar with his name as head of the Chamber of Commerce, and he is actually facilitating our strategic planning process. So we're not going external, and Rory thus far has he's been instrumental. I got to say, and Rory's here today as well. That was a good hire. Whoever was on that hiring committee, he's very, very competent from what I've seen thus far. And much has been accomplished already with respect to our strategic plan. We're ready to move on to public consultation with our stakeholders, which is going to occur right now, which is why I'm here, starting now until February 25th will be the public and stakeholder consultation process. These results will be used to develop our mission and value statements and our goals and strategies, and these will ultimately be used to build our business plan and formulate our budget that we intend to present to our members at the AGM in March. And upon membership approval, it will come to council for council's approval. And we'll have to have a discussion with finance in terms of the timing of that. And if that timing doesn't work, we'll work on things. Now, we all recognize the importance of a vibrant, beautiful, and safe downtown, and the significance of downtown, both economically and socially. And it can't be underestimated. Now, I've lived and worked in Thunder Bay, Timmins, Sudbury, North Bay, and Sault Ste. Marie. And we have far and away the best downtown in Northern Ontario for a multitude of reasons. And we intend on keeping it that way. But we can't do that without community input, and at times with community muscle, and both during the strategic planning process and well into the future. And that's our ask. It's a very simple ask, is we need folks to step forward. We need your input into the strategic planning process. We need your volunteerism. A vibrant downtown is critical. In order to do our job effectively, the DTA needs you. And in turn, we will be a willing and able partner. We will lobby. We will guide. We will support. And above all, we will listen and we will lead. We intend to be your voice for the continued improvement of downtown. And I just want you to know, as a board, we are very, very engaged in the downtown, and we are very, very excited, extremely excited. We spent 4 hours together Saturday morning. You got to be excited to give up a Saturday morning to work on strategic planning. So we're very anxious to move forward. We look forward to partnering with council. We look forward to our continued partnership with the city. And I don't have any proclamation necessary. I just want to thank you for this opportunity. We just want to make the community aware that we're moving forward and we need their support. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for your presentation, Mr. Hayes, and we appreciate the work you're doing at the Downtown Association.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Under Agenda Item 5.6, Convergent Energy, Dominic Perella, President and CEO of PUC, and Tremor Temchin, Director of Canadian Operations, are in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Mr. Perella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of Council. While our guest is getting set up, I'll introduce him. So once again, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about this exciting, innovative new project. As PUC's President and CEO, I have the pleasure this evening of introducing our guest from Convergent Energy and Power, Tremor Temchin. Tremor is the Director of Canadian Operations, and he is here tonight to provide Council with an overview of their energy storage project. As I'm sure Council is aware, there has been considerable public interest in this pilot project. For those viewing at home who may not be aware of this project, Convergent has been awarded a contract by the province to build a 7-megawatt-hour lithium-ion battery project at our transformer station located on Trunk Road near the South Market intersection. So once completed, this project is designed to efficiently store energy and release it to the provincial grid when required to improve voltage and frequency stability. So energy storage technology is at the distribution level is an emerging technology, and PUC is excited to be working with Convergent Energy as they explore ways to change that. It is innovative projects like this one that will ultimately allow for a more stable and reliable clean energy grid. And PUC is proud to be working with Convergent to bring this technology to Sault Ste. Marie and the province. So as the Director of Canadian Operations, Tremor plays an active part in all phases of Convergent's projects and is clearly the best person to answer any questions you may have. So without any further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Tremor to provide an overview of the project. Tremor?
Good evening. Thank you so much. Mayor Provenzano, council members, thank you for your time. It's a real pleasure to be here. I've been informed that I have 5 minutes to tell you about a project that I've been working on for close to 2 years. So I'm going to try my best to get going into it. So you'll have to excuse me if we rush there. I'm going to try and save some time towards the end for question and answers to make sure that you
Those aren't part of your 5 minutes.
They're not?
No,
Okay.
they're not, no.
Okay. Well, I may just go over anyway. We'll see here.
We'll be fine.
I'm going to provide you a brief introduction to my company, to Convergent Energy and Power. I'm going to discuss with you what energy storage is, and I'm going to try and devote most of the presentation to explaining the system that we're installing with PUC on their substation, and hopefully at the end we can get into some questions. A little bit about Convergent. We were founded in 2011, and we develop, own, and operate energy storage assets throughout North America. As you can see right now, we're either have developed or are developing 70 megawatts and 230 megawatt hours of projects. Specifically in Ontario, we have 2 large projects being installed right now through contract with the IESO. And we have 3 commercial and industrial installations going in as well. Those numbers are subject to change shortly, but as of right now, those are the projects that we're currently developing throughout the province. We do have an office in New York and an office in Toronto. And 2 of the core principles that you should know about us are that we use the projects to create value. So even though they are funded by the ISO and they benefit the ISO, they create value for all of the stakeholders involved, and we'll get into that a little more. And the other thing is that Convergent is not a technology company. We don't sell you our branded system of battery or our branded system of flywheel. We're technology neutral. So we try to find the best technologies available within the energy storage space and use them in the specific applications that they're required for. A little bit about energy storage. Because it is such a new field, some people are not so aware of what it is and what it means. Unlike traditional generation, like a gas-fired plant or solar power or wind power, energy storage, it doesn't produce its own electrons. It simply shifts the delivery time. You store the power just like you store it in the battery of your cell phone, and it can be used at any time beyond that. It's typically smaller than traditional infrastructure upgrades or other types of power production plants, and it's fully dispatchable. So unlike solar or wind, which only work when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, with energy storage, if the energy is stored, you can dispatch it at any time. So it gives you a nice, much more controllable resource throughout your grid. It's also nice to know that there's no emissions. unlike a gas-fired plant, you're not going to see any off-gassing of any type. So this is a fully sealed system. So that's just a brief overview of what energy storage is. And this slide it says a lot, but the high level, just in the interest of time, it's important to recognize in the top left corner of it, you'll see just an indication of how little storage there is throughout our energy system. The vast majority of our energy grid exists in a real-time situation. So the energy that we're using now to power these lights was only produced at most a few seconds ago, someplace far away. So if you look, you can see that in the oil industry, you have about a 12% reserve typically. In the energy industry, however, you have less than 1/100% stored at any time. So this shows that the emergence of energy storage is still quite small, but there's a big opportunity for it. It's also important to realize in the upper right corner of the screen that our current electricity infrastructure is not fully utilized. There's a lot of capacity on the grid, and what that allows for us to do is to make better use of some of the overbuilt infrastructure. So just talking briefly about energy storage again, that there are a lot of technologies on the market, and this graph is just intended to show you what some of the capacities are. The big takeaway here is the large green circle in the middle. So that's a lithium ion. That shows that lithium is the most flexible storage technology in the space right now. You can see we have our other project that's being installed in Guelph in Ontario is a flywheel system, and the flywheel is capable of producing a lot of power, but only in a short duration. So in Sault Ste. Marie, we've opted for a 7 megawatt hour lithium ion storage system that provides the ISO with a tremendous amount of flexibility. It can be dispatched for a short time or a long time at a high power or a low power. Here you can see just a few of again, convergent being technology neutral, you can see a few of the systems that we've dispatched so far. We have the 5 megawatt flywheel in Guelph. We have the battery system going here in Sault Ste. Marie. We have a very large battery system being deployed in California. And we actually have a system going into Sarnia as well. So I'm happy to discuss the various differences here. Each system comes from a different provider with different specifications to match the needs of that particular area. So that's that kind of wraps up the high-level overview of energy storage and what Convergent does. The system particular to Sault Ste. Marie, is a 7 megawatt hour system, and the primary goal of it is to manage a variety of grid conditions, including frequency support and voltage control. So the Soo in particular was identified because of the nature of the load here in the Soo. It's a 100 megawatt plus load, at times up to 160 megawatts, at times much lower. It's on a single 15 kV radial transmission line, so the connectivity is important for the ISO, and you have a large increase in the last 10 years of solar and wind production in this area. And as I mentioned before, solar and wind production, power production, is intermittent. It can be unreliable, but even when it is reliable, it tends to all come at once. When you have a large solar array deployed, the sun shines, suddenly all of those panels can produce power. The same thing goes for wind. So the thing with our project is that we're able to take advantage of all that power that is produced in those intermittent times, and we're able to store it and help stabilize the grid throughout that period. Our system is being supplied by General Electric, and that system is fully guaranteed for the duration of the contract. GE is obviously a very large company, and it's nice to have that reassurance of a big balance sheet, a large company, to provide these types of guarantees. So, as I mentioned before, this is a lithium-ion technology. It's going to be available 24/7. It's dispatchable and fully remotely monitored and dispatched. So this will be monitored from our network operations center. You can see there that it's got integrated fire suppression and temperature control, humidity control, all of these things are constantly part of the monitoring. You also have, just in general, about a 20-year lifespan for lithium ions. So even though the term of our contract is shorter, this is going to be a long-term resource for PUC and for the ISO in this region. Everything, of course, is fully certified by the ESA, the CUL, and the CSA. So here's just a brief, a high-level overview of where the St. Mary's substation is and where our system is going to be located within that. You can see it's near Truck Road and McNabb Road. It's on a small little dirt road there. And if you see, there's that kind of weird green horseshoe shape that signifies our lease of land from PUC. On this slide, you'll get a sense as to what's actually going to be in that space. You can see that there's a large central square, which is the battery enclosure. That's where the 7 megawatts of batteries will be stored. You have inverters, transformers, switchgears, and all of the other equipment that's required to help integrate the system into PUC's infrastructure, and so that it can be accessed by the ISO. You also have you'll notice we have a reinforced entryway and 2 levels of gate protection to keep the site secure. One of the important things that Convergent is where we're a small company, and we try to be highly localized in the way we approach our work on site. We've partnered with a lot of local companies to make sure to bring this project to life. Not only our wonderful partnership with PUC, but STEM Engineering is our construction manager. WSP's local Sault Ste. Marie office has performed our design work. S&T Electric is performing our electrical infrastructure work. Inside Technology is performing our metering work. And Saldan JBX Construction is doing our excavation and civil scope. So in total, this is a project that will mean in excess of $2 million of capital being invested into local businesses in Sault Ste. Marie. That's obviously not the entire spend on the project, because we had to supply the system itself from GE, but we've really focused our capital expenditure on the town of Sault Ste. Marie. We want this to benefit the town as much as anyone. Just a brief sense of how the project is going. We think, in spite of the cold and the snow, all those contractors I just mentioned, our guys are on site every day. You're welcome to wave hello from Truck Road as you pass them. But we're trying to bring this system online by May of 2017. I think we're going to succeed in that. We may even be able to pull that into April. But on a high level, you can see all of our pre-development work was completed by the end of October. That included all of the permitting, the Ministry of Environment permits, and the various other permits that were required from the city, the building permits. We're in the execution phase now. As I mentioned, that'll be completed by the end of April. And then the operations that will begin in May. So that's, you can see there are some pictures of our transformers arriving on site, some of the large cranes that we had to use, and some of the excavation equipment that JBX is using. So this is the last slide, just an overview of the benefits for the city of Sault Ste. Marie. Even though this project was contracted by the ISO, which is a provincial body, we think that a lot of the benefits are going to come to the community of Sault Ste. Marie. Number one is going to be an increase in grid reliability. As I mentioned before, with the influx of solar and wind energy being produced locally, having this type of asset online can provide a balancing influence. It can accept when excess energy is produced, and when energy drops off, it can smooth that transition. So that's going to aid in grid reliability and overall longevity of the infrastructure that is here within Sault Ste. Marie. As I mentioned before, we have a substantial economic investment in the companies and in the individual workers of Sault Ste. Marie. I know a lot of the guys that I've talked to on site are happy, even though it's really rough being out in the cold, they're happy to have work over the winter. And so this is something we're proud of, we're able to work with them on that individual level. As I mentioned, also the IESO, being a provincial entity, is footing the bill for this infrastructure investment. So the benefits are primarily going to be here in Sault Ste. Marie and throughout the transmission grid that services Sault Ste. Marie, but the cost is being shared throughout the entire province. So that's a nice benefit for you. As I mentioned also, it's a zero emission system. So these batteries do not off gas. It's going to be silent, and it's going to be completely clean. We can get into more details, I'm sure, in the Q&A about the technologies that are used there to prevent any kind of contamination. And then, as Mr. Butland has mentioned, he'd like to see Sault Ste. Marie become the green energy capital of North America. And I think this project is a step in that direction. It's going to be one of the first energy storage systems to be operational in Canada. And I think it'll help people see how progressive and innovative Sault Ste. Marie is on this front. So I'm sorry if I went over my time, but that's just a brief overview of the system and what energy storage is, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It was really informative. We have Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. First, before I get to my question, I want to say to Council Butland, thank you for inviting this individual, and thank you for coming. Very good presentation. And I also look forward to having other updates in the future from other companies. So, Councillor Butland, I think this was your initiative to have these updates, so thank you for doing that. So here's my question. If I understand, just reading, this is a pilot project. You were saying something about you're going to be here for 15 years. Is that correct?
The lifespan of the system is up to 20 years. At a very minimum, these systems, because of the lithium-ion technology, can last 10 years, and that would just mean a replacement of the batteries themselves. So the actual infrastructure, the buildings, the transformers, the inverters, is all intended to last at least 20 years. The contract that we have, though, is not a 20-year contract. So the IESO has contracted us for a shorter period of time. And once that contract expires, I guess we'll figure out what to do. We'll talk to Dominic. We'll see what it makes the most sense from there.
Okay. So how long is the contract for?
The contract's a 3-year contract.
3-year contract. Okay. And also, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, you said this is GE technology?
That's right.
Okay. And I also understand that we are going to be the first ones up and running, and then Guelph also has a pilot project going?
In the province of Ontario, these two projects will be among the first energy storage assets actually operating within Ontario, yeah.
Okay.
But it's not the first in North America. GE has several systems. Right. There are numerous systems throughout North America currently.
Right, like California, you're saying, and so forth.
And
then my last question is, or last point is, again, this is wonderful. This is,
thank you.
I think, reinforcing the idea that we as a city are serious about green energy and that we want the alternative capital. I hope that council, as we move forward with this project, that we'll consider other projects. It looks like it's also, as you said, has put $2 million back into our economy and future, hopefully. But also, maybe this would be a good example of how we can maybe give some other incentives, potentially to citizens that are using renewable energy through some other tax incentives. But we have to become more serious if we want to be a truly green city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kompotich, I have you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Kompotich.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano, and thank you, Mr. Temchin, for your excellent presentation. And most of my questions have been answered. I had some safety issues I just wanted to go over, and it seems like you answered them. You mentioned that it's silent, so there's no noise emissions coming out, and it's clean. Which is excellent. And is there any other thing regarding safety for the area and people that are in that vicinity with that facility to make them aware of any safety concerns whatsoever?
You know, there's really not. It's a very safe, very reliable system. The news of the Samsung phones blowing up, that's all. You know, lithium has had some bad press lately. Once the system is fully operational and commissioned, we're going to bring in the fire department, the Sault Ste. Marie Fire Department, and do a full walkthrough of the system and the fire suppression system so that they're fully up to date about what's happening, about how the system operates and what the protocols are, what the best practices are to address any scenario that may arise, any sort of emergency scenario. But Aside from that, it's a fully contained system, and the purpose-built enclosure that I showed, the large box at the center of it, is really a pretty remarkable safety enhancement.
Excellent. Just one more question. Now, the other thing too is there going to be any employment that would result out of such a facility, and what would be the numbers?
It's hard to say numbers at this time. There will be a long-term service contract. It's an unmanned facility, just like the substation as a whole it really only takes one person or two people to supervise from PUC. It'll be folded into that kind of daily supervision, but it also is monitored 24/7 by Convergent, and then there will be quarterly maintenance performed by a local servicing company. That servicing company the contract's going to be held by GE. So GE will train the company, and so that's, for the duration of the project, there is going to be some local involvement in maintaining it and keeping it running properly.
Great. And just one final question, and just to expand on Councillor Hollingsworth, in the future, is it possible for expansion then?
Yeah, it is possible for expansion. It's the system right now is built for the capacity that the IESO has requested it to be. So it's certainly possible to expand. The contracting structures that would have to be in place would determine any further expansion. There is a little bit more room on site at the substation. It would really depend on the collaboration of PUC, the IESO, and Convergent to find
okay, thank you.
Expansion opportunities. Thank you.
Councillor Butland.
Yes. Thanks, Tremor, and that's the first thing you say. A name like Tremor is unusual, almost unique, and said he was born during an earthquake, so that explains it. Anyways, to the layperson out there, energy storage, and you've given us a great overview. What do they see as a value to the everyday consumer of electricity in Sault Ste. Marie?
Well, one of the wonderful things, if Sault Ste. Marie is producing so much wind and solar, that if you can't use that at the time it's being produced, then it has to go other places. With storage, you can produce solar energy, store it in the battery, and then use it at night when there is no solar energy. So it has the ability to shift the dispatch of green energy to times when it's not being produced is one of the major advantages of energy storage. It's also clean technology in the sense that there is no fuel source required. You're not burning fossil fuels and creating carbon emissions to power it. So it can be powered by nuclear, it can be powered by hydro, it can be powered by any fuel source. And in the sense that you're able to do that, you don't need to then build out other dirtier forms of power production. So those are two substantial benefits.
Thanks. I think you've explained very well what the advantages of this energy storage is, and being one of the first pilot project, one of the reasons because of our climate, I suspect, is it may play a hand. Bottom line, though, is it's a 3-year project. Maybe it goes to Dominic. Does this energy storage project have a life after Convergent moves on?
Well, yeah, it absolutely does. I'm happy to defer to Dominic, but because of this is a system that is built for a much longer lifespan than the initial contract. And from Convergent's standpoint, we've done the real legwork to get it built and have it financed and actually deliver it. And once it's there, the value of it can play for a very long time for different people. So it's something that's beyond my control. I know, I know that, but we'd love to see this have a much longer term impact than Sault Ste.
So would we. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Temchin, for that presentation as well. The mayor will be happy to know that several of my questions were asked. So, but without belaboring the focus, so if you had mentioned that we could store energy, to be clear, that energy that's stored can be used specifically for Sault Ste. Marie residents. that it's not released into the grid and transported down to some other locale?
Because this contract that we hold is with the IESO, the asset is connected directly to the transmission system, not PUC's distribution system. So the individual distribution of power is going to, it can, for our connection, will come from the IESO's transmission system and back to the IESO's transmission system. But that doesn't mean to say that that power is then not going to be used by PUC for distribution in that area. It's completely subject to the way the IESO dispatches the system.
That makes it more confusing. I'm
sorry.
And I apologize.
We don't control the power after.
Yeah.
The IESO still does.
Okay. So what will, I guess, what will trigger release of the energy that's stored? How about I ask that?
The IESO will monitor. We have a fiber optic connection that is being delivered to the IESO. They'll be able to see the real-time amount of storage in the system.
Right.
And based on grid conditions, they will inform Convergent that we either need to dispatch or charge the system in accordance with what they're seeing on the grid.
Okay.
And a second component of that is that Convergent can also sell energy at certain times when the prices are high, or take energy when the prices are low. There are other avenues that the IESO is allowing us to do because this is a pilot project,
Right.
and they want to learn how the dispatch and control of the system is supposed to work.
So as soon as energy is released, does that automatically trigger the process again where the batteries will be recharged?
It doesn't. The batteries can be charged or discharged at any time depending on how much storage they have.
Right.
So the typical profile would be to charge at night
Yeah.
when there's excess electricity on the grid and it's very cheap, and the demand for that electricity is quite low. And discharge during the day, during the peak times when the sun and solar energy might be being produced. There's lots of different ways that the profile will work, and it will really be contingent upon what the IESO wants.
Just a curiosity question, when you're looking at solar power in Sault Ste. Marie, do you have an idea of how much power is generated on a sunny day from the solar farms in Sault Ste. Marie?
I discussed this with Dominic earlier today, and I defer to him, but he said 60 megawatts during the...
In a day?
Up to 60 megawatts. And for comparison, again, this is 7 megawatts.
Yeah, I'm just trying to put it in perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just picking up on that last point about the production and how much is produced. It sounds to me like there is still a lot of energy that gets created, if you can call it that does sort of goes to waste.
Sure.
Is there not? Yeah, okay. So is there, or could there be opportunity for more storage down the line of the energy we produce on high production days, or sunny days or windy days, to distribute, not just in Sault Ste. Marie but elsewhere?
Absolutely. And the mechanism that we were awarded this contract through would be the same mechanism probably that it would be procured in the future, which is typically an RFP that's open to bidders from around the world. So there's certainly more opportunities. Sault Ste. Marie being on the cutting edge of green technology, of green energy production, you're going to have that interest in using the solar and the wind that you've already got to fuel this next step, which is how do we store it, how do we use it more efficiently within our own town and surrounding communities. So
That's great. Well, if we've got the energy, we are happy to give it away to be stored to other communities if they need it. So hopefully there's future projects in the works for you and for our energy.
Councilor Huppernen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Temchin. That was a very interesting presentation. My question has been asked. Councillor Christian had asked about how it would affect Sault Ste. Marie directly, and I understand now it goes back into the grid and it's distributed. So my question has been asked, but I think it's great. I'm very excited about it, and I'm just wondering, are you offering shares in your company?
That's above my pay grade, I can tell you that. But what I can offer, I know that when the system is complete in the springtime and when it's fully commissioned, we'd like to do a ribbon cutting ceremony with the council, obviously, with PUC, and we'd love to make this a showpiece for the community of Sault Ste. Marie, the same way that your solar and wind installations are. So.
Well, thank you. I hope to be there.
We have Councillor Fata.
Mr. Mayor, so the 7 megawatts, was that arrived at based on the city, the size?
It was what the IESO procured from us. We offered them a variety of sizes and durations because this system is intended that the maximum it can produce is 7 megawatts for 1 hour. You can also produce 3.5 megawatts for 2 hours, or any ratio thereof. So it was what the IESO asked us to build, basically. That's what they felt was appropriate for their needs at the transmission level.
In terms of solar and wind, I'm just going to tell you my take on solar and wind. There's three issues that come to mind with me with solar and wind, as we've been exposed to it for the last couple of years. Large, costly contracts, poor reliability, and as a result, I think, a very poor investment for the taxpayers of Ontario. If I were to ask you to talk to an average taxpayer in Sault Ste. Marie and telling him what the advantages are of convergent energy, what would you say to that person?
I would say that, first off, as I mentioned before, this is an investment in integrating the resources that you have. So because solar and wind, as you said, can be unreliable, because the contracts were very expensive, this is like an add-on in the sense that you're going to make better utilization of those resources that already exist by bringing this system online. So I think it's, in that context, it's enhancing the resources you've already paid for, and it's giving you a dispatchability that you've never had in the past with those assets.
Just so nobody at home is confused, we, as in the city of Sault Ste. Marie, haven't paid for that infrastructure, and we are not paying for this infrastructure.
Exactly.
Okay. So just to not confuse anybody at home, this isn't costing any of the taxpayers of the city of Sault Ste. Marie anything.
Well, it's costing the taxpayers of Ontario, and we're in that group.
Frank, there's going to be a by-election coming up, and if you want to be a candidate in that by-election, I encourage you to put your name forward. But as for now, you're a city councilor of the city of Sault Ste. Marie. Listen, we really appreciate your presentation. As a director at the PUC, I was aware that you guys were at this for a while, so I want to commend the PUC leadership for working on this project and your company for working with it. And obviously, we hope it works out as a positive project and positions Sault Ste. Marie as a progressive community.
Thank you.
Thank you very
so
much
much
for your time.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dominic.
Under Agenda Item 5.7, Tire Processing Plant Status Update, Bob McMean, CEO, Environmental Waste International, is in attendance.
Mr. McMean, welcome to council.
Well, thank you. Nice to see you again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank councillors. Thanks particular to Steve, John over here. And we do sell shares in our company. So you're talking to the right guy here, and it's not above my pay grade. I'm here to talk to you about jobs, technology, investment capital, bringing all of those things to this city. I'm here to ask for your help, and I'll tell you why in a second. So we've spent about $12 million so far building a full-scale pilot plant in this city. We've had it running well for about 2 years. It's been in existence from groundbreaking to actually working for about 5 years, but basically working really on a commercial basis for about 2 years. That plant had an environmental permit that was attached to a pilot plant. Those permits have now run out. We're now applying we're in the process of applying for permanent permits from the Ministry of Environment, but that takes a long time. What we're seeking assistance in is getting an audience, or you guys getting an audience with the Minister of Environment, Glenn Murray, and asking if we can have 10 to 20 days that we could run that plant from time to time as we get visitors and prospective clients in that want to invest in that plant and buy other plants around the world, basically. So that's my simple request. I'm happy to go through and tell you what our technology does. Many of you have been to the plant. I know you have, Mr. Mayor. Yep. And a number of other people. Steve, I think you've been there. John, of course, has been there like the endless times. It's his life's work, I think. But we will be creating jobs. We have people lined up to invest over $6 million more in this community. We'll be creating about 16 jobs, roughly. Not all of them high-tech jobs, but some of them lab jobs, some of them management jobs, some of them regular sort of worker-type jobs. We bring a lot of people to this community. We brought, 20 to 30 different groups from around the world that weren't aware of where this city was at all. We brought them here. We have them stay here, try to put this place in the map. A lot of people are aware of this city. And I'll just tell you a bit about the problem that we solve. That's a tire dump, one of many, many, many tire dumps around the world. There's 1.5 billion tires come on the market, used tires come on the market every year.
Where's that tire dump?
I don't know specifically, I forget now where we clipped that one, but you can see the person there.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's not an Ontario tire dump. No. But there are some tire dumps that you can see from space. They are so big. They're just huge. The tires today, whether they're truck tires, light truck tires, heavy truck tires, off-the-road tires, car tires, go to making crumb and shred. You chop them up, and many technologies do that. Some go to landfill, some go to cement kilns, some go to power plants. The ones that are burnt in power plants and cement kilns are pretty nasty for the environment. Our technology is extremely clean. We surpass any environmental standard set by the federal government, the provincial government, the civic government, everything. That's a blessing and a curse in some ways. It's a blessing because it gives us very good selling tool around the world. We're able to say that we meet the toughest environmental standards in the world. That's a good thing. The tough thing is it costs a lot of money to comply with those standards, to even get them in the first place. And we're a small startup company. But anyways, it's a big problem. We have a great solution. We have a large sales funnel around the world. That's a picture of our plant in this city. It was built to do 900 tires a day. We're going to spend $6 million more to get it up to 2,000 tires a day. That's a picture of the end of the plant where the carbon comes out. Our plant is, imagine you had a loaf of bread and you wanted to stick it through our patented technology. You'd get the flour, the yeast, and the water out. We put a whole tire in, we get carbon black, oil, steel, and gas out. We use the gas to power the plant. We sell the oil, steel, and carbon black. Part of the upgrade of this plant is to create what's called plastic master batch. We would take that carbon black. We'd add in plastic on a 50-50 basis and create what's called plastic master batch, a black plastic master batch, which is the building blocks for anything plastic. So whether it's blow molding, creating bags, whether that's made from plastic master batch. That probably is. This is. You can make coatings. You can make plastic. You can make inks. All kinds of things. So we would be creating, in the jobs, we'd be creating a feedstock a plastic feedstock for other industries, a very cheap source of feedstock, a local feedstock for other industries that want to create things out of plastic, basically. That's another view of our plant. That's a view of the process. It's called sublimation. So nothing hits a liquid form. It goes in. We have patents all over the world. We have patents in Canada. We have patents in Asia. We have patents in the U.S., Brazil, Europe, whatever. We have lots of patents, lots of technology. This is very high-tech stuff. So you can see from number one, a tire goes in. Number two, it starts to sublimate, which is the gases come off. And you're left down here on slide number 5 with just steel and carbon. The hydrocarbons have come off. We chill them. The ones that chill end up being oil. The ones that don't chill end up being syngas, and we use that syngas to power the plant. Basically, that's sort of the technology. We won't bore you with the flow charts. Anyway, that's the oil, the carbon black, and the steel. In the carbon black, we upgrade it to master batch. Those are some of the products that you can create out of the process. You can see inks in the top right, coatings the bottom right, pipes bottom left, tires, which is where it comes from in the first place, goes back into that industry, and the top right, the interior of your car is filled with plastic, basically. So we would create about just over 7 tons of carbon black a day, almost 15 tons of recycled master batch, 3.6 tons of steel, 6.4 tons of oil, 2.6 tons of syngas. That's a lot of stuff to sell. Again, 16 full-time jobs. Part of our secondary expansion plan in the years to come would be to take off-the-road tires. No one is doing that in the world. There's a lot of mining activity and big industrial activity around in northern Ontario. No one has ever figured out how to deal with those big 15-foot tires. We've been running them through our plant. We've been running them very successfully. We could create a world showcase, not only an economic model that really works, but a world showcase for a plant that deals with this problem mining companies haven't dealt with satisfactorily. So that would be sort of our second stage in doing things. I want to show you here's the economics. The economics are superb. For that kind of investment, you see at the top line, the red top line where it says 701,000 and 5.739 million. That would be the investment, two-stage investment that we have people lined up to do. If we could now bring them back and show them a second time, this plant. You can see the profit in the bottom line, projected operating profit. First stage would be 1.3 million, the second would be 5.2 million. These are annual profits. The return on investment that generates is over 80% return on investment. Not many investments in the world where you get that kind of return. And it's regardless of what government does. Government policy is whether there's a tipping fee or no tipping fee, whatever. It's a good business. It's environmentally sound, environmentally friendly, and it makes a lot of money. But I need your help somehow. I need your help in getting in front of the minister to plead my case, so that I can run that plant a day or two. I have people in Italy. John's met them that have given me assurances. They spent the last year in Italy getting their own permits, land, building, whatever. They want to come over here, bring their engineering team over here once more, and after that, they'd like to give us an order. We have people in Quebec, same thing. They'd not only like to give us an order to build a plant, they'd like to invest in this plant. We have people in Australia, the same thing. We have people in China. We have people in the U.S. We have people all over the world. I have about $350 to $400 million worth of potential sales that I've been working on for a year and a half. And I can't close them without running that plant. That's my story. I need your help.
I'm having a hard time kind of getting a sense of the disconnect because, you're painting a really positive picture.
Yeah.
And if your business generates obviously the kind of income that it could,
yeah,
and it's environmentally friendly that it is, where's the problem?
The problem is we have not sold the plant yet. It took us a number of years to perfect the technology. Since that time, I've been with the company 3 years. I'm what's called a hired gun, sent in to fix up the company. And I've done that. We have the technology working now. We have raised some additional capital. We have built up a worldwide sales funnel, and we've been working on for over about a year and a half now, and we're on the verge of making our first sale. To make that sale, we have to demonstrate that plant. That plant has to run.
And you can't run it anymore?
We can't run it unless I did it illegally.
Yeah, well, obviously you can't do that. So, but you've lost the authority from the provincial government to run it? Is that the...
Our permits we had a 5-year, what's called pilot plant permit. We meet every environmental standard. That's run out. We're now in the process of, as of last week, we have submitted all of our documents to get our permanent certificates.
Okay.
And we get very good support from the local Ministry of Environment, but the law is that you can't renew a pilot plant permit. You need special permission from the minister to be able to run it until we get those permits. And that could be 8 months from now.
Okay, so that's the problem.
That's the problem.
You're in this gray period where you're trying to get your permanent permit.
I am.
You do not yet have your permanent permit.
Right, and I want special permission to run it. It's not like we're polluting anything. We don't pollute anything.
You want to keep on doing what you were doing when you had your pilot permit.
Right, run it from day to day. I need 10
until they give you the permanent permit.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying
Yeah,
that.
sorry, I was just trying to drill down because I didn't quite get that, but I see now what you're saying and asking for. Councillor Butland?
You've crystallized it very well, Mr. Mayor. So my question, Mr. McBean, the technology the tweaking is all over, it's ready to go?
The tweaking's over. I would say to investors, I would say there is literally no technology risk and there's no market risk. We have proven the technology works, and we have proven the products that generate out of that plant sell well. So, yes.
Okay, so I think everybody understands. Somebody told me, they said, well, why are you bringing this in? This is the MPP's role. Well, right now, we're in the midst of not having an MPP, so I guess we can act in that role.
I was dealing with them, but, you know.
So the bottom line is, and the mayor again has crystallized it, they want to do what they've been doing in the past and got into no trouble with the MOE with what they were doing then. They would like to continue to do it, and that's Mr. McBean and Elson's ask of us. Now, whether we can arrange the meeting with the minister or not, but we can at least say, can we have a special exception so that they can run the plant maybe 10 times a year, 15 times a year, a day or two at a time, to entertain people from elsewhere. And you know, I provided everybody a SooToday article from 7 years ago where the Premier was in town and gave them a $2 million grant. And there's been considerable other provincial federal monies that have gone towards this plant. So it's one of those that seems to be on the cusp. And let's get behind it. Thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think we have one more question. Councillor Christian?
Are you aware, sir, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I agree with what my colleague said. I think we need to do everything we can to help support the project, not only from a local perspective, but, I mean, you're talking about used tires that need to be cleaned up. There's an environmental responsibility as well beyond your immediate need. Are you aware of any other businesses that have fallen into this area where their permits have run out? And can you comment on how likely it is you can get special permission to actually get the government to allow you to run the plant for, say, 10 days a year?
I don't know. I've only been told by the local ministry that it's beyond their pay grade.
Okay.
That you have to go to the minister. It's within the minister's purview to be able to do that. Okay. And that's why I'm seeking an audience, or you guys get an audience and just give me some days. I've been notified by the Italians. They need 5 days' notice. They'll be over here.
No, I certainly appreciate what you're trying to achieve here, and I for one would be willing to do whatever. My opinion is I would be willing to do anything I could. I think it's important.
Well, if I get an audience, I'd love to have one or more of you come with me.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay?
Anybody else?
Yep.
So we have a motion in front of us. Madam Clerk, if you could read the motion, please.
A motion by Councillors Butland and Christian, resolved that Sault Ste. Marie City Council recognizes and supports the efforts of Environmental Waste International, Inc. in its endeavors to expand its client base, and that Mayor Provenzano be authorized to correspond with the province in this regard.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mr. McBean.
Thanks very much for your audience.
Okay, I think we're now on the consent agenda, are we not, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we are.
Matters on the consent agenda. Councillor Romano,
I'd like to pull item 6.11.
you want to pull it from consent?
Yes.
Or do you want to speak to it on consent?
I suppose I could just speak to it, but I would have some questions and comments with
Yeah.
respect to it, so whether it's...
No, we're on the consent agenda, so we can start with that one.
I suspect it would, okay. And we're content to do so at this time, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've reviewed the letter contained within the agenda, and I have a number of questions. Perhaps first I'll start off with our CAO.
Sure.
Further to the letter written on January 17th to the OFM, I understand that the review has already commenced in Sault Ste. Marie, and it started on this past Monday, January the 16th.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, the review was actually identified through a letter of December 7th, 2015, that was sent by the fire marshal to my office and to copy the clerk and to the fire chief. Council saw that on their agenda of December 12th.
In terms of the actual start date, though, I understand that the fire marshal's office, they have something in the range of 22 inspectors, a number of vehicles here as of this past Monday, January the 16th.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, the process started on December 7th per the initiation of the letter from the fire marshal's office. As part of that process, there is a review team that consisted of 17 individuals that were dispatched by the fire marshal's office to Sault Ste. Marie for the period of January 16th through January 19th. That's in addition to a number of materials that were requested in advance of the review team coming on board, in addition to a number of questions that were provided and are vetted through our administration and through the fire services offices, and through a number of specific interviews that were identified and scheduled as part of that process. The review team that's been in the city for left on the 19th after they completed their review, and have made comments verbally and in writing that they were quite thankful for the full cooperation that they were provided as part of the efforts that they made during that week.
Okay, so they were here as of, there were 17 that you're aware of as of January 16th. Okay. In terms of what can flow from the report, and I understand we expect to see a report sometime in March, is I believe what I remember hearing when this matter first came up. What types of recommendations can the OFM make, or might the OFM make in relation with this review process to the city of Sault Ste. Marie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, I would leave that to the fire marshal's office in terms of the recommendations they would be making. It would be the culmination of the review. I can say from the city's perspective that the process we understand that takes place, and to be clear to the members of the audience at home, OFMEM refers to the Office of the Fire Marshal and Emergency Management. Our understanding is that the review would be conducted. There would be a number of recommendations that they would look at relative to fire protection services that they would then make to the fire marshal himself or herself. And then that fire marshal would determine whether they will or will not write a report to council for its consideration. We've satisfied all of the requirements in terms of what the fire marshal's office has asked of us, although we still are open to any follow-up questions that they would like to make. But it's in the hands of the assistant fire marshal at this time and his team to be able to put that material together for the consideration of the fire marshal. And we're, like you, understanding that that report may or may not come forward in March to the fire marshal, and then may or may not come to the council after that.
Thank you. On one of our agendas, I believe it was in February of 2016, we had a list of a couple of reviews that had been conducted by the fire marshal's office, and I'm summarizing that. And both of those that were contained within our agenda at that time, and I may not be quoting the timeframe, but I believe it was in February, specified, in each one, there was a recommendation for a comprehensive risk assessment to be obtained by the city on an independent, by an independent third party. Now, on November 21st, I had brought a resolution that was seconded by Council Bruni to obtain a comprehensive risk assessment. That failed on the 21st of November. So notwithstanding that failure, if there were to be a recommendation for a comprehensive risk assessment, how does that play into the vote that council conducted on November 21st? Could that still occur, or would it require reconsideration, generally speaking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, I would defer to clerks in terms of reconsiderations, but for clarity, a comprehensive risk assessment has always been part of the fire plan, the fire realignment plan. There's always been an expectation for that. I think the issues on timing and the November 21st request or motion that was not taken up by council was to accelerate that comprehensive risk assessment being undertaken. It is to be undertaken, and that's always been envisioned right from day one in terms of this process. So I wouldn't see it as a reconsideration. I'd look to the nodding of the head and maybe...
And perhaps for clarity, I appreciate that. I didn't, that was my intention, was to refer to it in the context of an acceleration of the comprehensive risk assessment. So perhaps if the clerk can assist with that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, just as the CAO has mentioned, the motion of November 21st sought to accelerate the process of having a comprehensive risk assessment. As the CAO mentioned, it's always been staff's position that a comprehensive risk assessment would be undertaken at some point through this exercise. As to a matter of a comprehensive risk assessment being done in response to potential recommendations from the Office of the Fire Marshal, we really have to wait and see what the Fire Marshal would have to tell council before we comment further.
Fair enough. Perhaps this question should go back to our CAO or potentially the fire chief. I'll leave it to either one of the two of you. With respect to the original fire realignment plan of October 26, 2015, I understand from our last meeting we're still approximately 2 years or 18 months away from completion. How much more is there to do with respect to completion of that plan or bringing it to its conclusion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll look to the nodding of the chief or defer to the chief, but again, we were looking at this to be fully up and operational by 2018, early 2018, at which time the comprehensive risk assessment was being identified. So far, we've been on track. That said, with the Fire Marshal's office coming in to do this review, we have put a pause on a couple of the components of the plan, so it might be a couple months later in 2018 than was originally envisioned, so as to be able to have more information to inform this process.
All right. There were indications at the time of our realignment on October 26, 15, where it was indicated by our CAO that if there was any problems with this realignment that I remember us talking about a 3-year time frame to implement, and if there were any issues or difficulties with the realignment or any signs of certainly safety concerns or other problems, that we could hit the pause button at any point in time, and you mentioned earlier the pause. So the pause that you're referring to is strictly on a temporary basis, given the OFM having been here and been doing their thing for a short period of time. Help me out with this pause.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, again, it's not a pause of the fire realignment plan. That plan continues to proceed and on the basis that was done before. There's just a couple of components that related to the public education and training that have been delayed in terms of their hiring pending the OFM review, which is a component of the non-suppression side of the plan.
but it's still expected that at the conclusion of the review and our presentation back to council, we will be getting back on track, and at the most would be a couple of months delayed in terms of the completion of the 3-year transition.
All right, thank you. Further to that point then, given those comments at the original October 26, 2015 meeting relating to, remember the nature of the comments where it was going to be a fluid plan and it could be stopped at any point in time if there were any concerns. Has the idea of a pause from staff, and at least in terms of your discussions with the chief, has that ever been contemplated since the Ministry of Labor's order of November 2nd or the Ontario Fire Marshal's indication of December 7th that they would be conducting a review?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, no. This is all part of the process. Ministry of Labor, for example, was just questioning some of the language around one of some 60-plus operating guidelines that had been established as a result of this initiative, and that work has been undertaken and is being completed on the schedule required for January, and it has not impeded our progress. The OFM review is simply because of the education component, because it is fire protection services that is being looked at by the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office, but everything else is continuing on the same basis, and we are not fully stopping public education. It's just we had some vacancies there that we were saying we would not fill until we got this completed.
Thank you. In April of this year, April 11th, we had a meeting. On the agenda, there was a package that had been prepared relating to the update on fire services, and specifically there was a lot of questions that had been asked from the February meeting as to what a comprehensive risk assessment was exactly, what the review process was through the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office. And there had been some confusion from that prior February meeting. With respect to that meeting, there had been, or appeared to be at that time, an indication that the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office would only ever conduct one of these reviews if in fact the city had asked for it to be done, or asked for the Fire Marshal to attend, or if there was a risk of some kind to the safety of the public in that community. Obviously, as far as I know, we've never asked for one of these to be done, clearly. And the indication within the letter that we have of January 17th clearly notes that there is no serious public safety risk in the city of Sault Ste. Marie presently. So then, can you help us out in terms of your discussions with the Fire Marshal or anyone's as to why they're here then, or why they were here? The Fire Marshal's Office, that is, if we didn't ask them and if there wasn't a serious public safety threat.
I'm going to answer that, Councillor Romano, because I put that question specifically to the people that were here. You'll recall there was a Sault Star article last year where the Fire Marshal someone from the Fire Marshal's Office had commented in it about doing comprehensive risk assessments. It was always my understanding in dealing with the Fire Marshal's Office that they didn't do comprehensive risk assessments. So I called the Fire Marshal's Office and I had a conversation with someone at the Fire Marshal's Office at that time, and it was actually Mr. Booth, who was here presently. And he told me that they come in two circumstances. When we ask, or if they think there's a public threat. So one of the reasons why I wanted to meet with them when they were here, because I knew we didn't ask, and I wanted to be certain, as the mayor of the community, that there wasn't a public threat, and that anything we did didn't lead to a public threat, because if there was a public threat, I think we should have been told that. And if there was a public threat and we were told that, I believe we would all, 13 of us, act on it. So I put that question directly to them. Said, your letter to me that said you were coming here didn't indicate that you were coming here because there was a public threat. Is there a public threat? Should I be concerned about there being a public threat? And I was advised directly that they weren't here as a result of a concern over a public threat. And I was very clear with them that I was going to document that for our own purposes. I'm not comfortable in totality kind of relaying the entirety of our conversation because I didn't communicate to the people I was meeting with that I would relay the entirety of the conversation. But I did communicate that I would relay that part of it, which was that they weren't here because we asked, or they weren't here because there was a public threat. So if you want to know why they were here, I think the most appropriate person to ask would be the fire marshal, him or herself, or Mr. Booth, who was here. My understanding, so I'm speaking my understanding, because I don't want to speak for somebody else, was that they were looking for an objective assessment of the services and the information so they could review it themselves. But, you know, the point of that meeting I had was specifically to make that determination, because I know that all of you care, and I certainly care about that distinction. And their answer was clear to me, and it was clear to me that I was going to write to them as a result of that and document it, and I told them that before the meeting ended, and they were fine with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And obviously that's we're all worried about it, and this has been a big issue for over a year now. I'm wondering, when I reviewed your letter with respect to the terminology used in it, serious public threat or serious threat to the safety of the public, is there any chance that we're splitting hairs here in terms of the terminology? Like, is it, you know, are they referring to serious and they're defining it in a different way than just a public threat?
Councillor Mann, what I did, which I thought was important, was I used the legislative terms. So I was using the legislative terms. So I went to the legislation and I used that term. So if you're asking if it's hairs being split, no one communicated to me any concern over any public threat. You could, whatever you want to use as the adjective, there was no communication of any concern over any public threat.
And it would appear to be a bit odd, given the contents of your letter. It just, the concern, and this is sort of a question, but I think it probably leaves a pretty open-ended answer. November 2nd, we get an order from the Ministry of Labor which states that there's issues with our operating guidelines, and specifically addressed within those concerns of those operating guidelines dealing with interior fire attack. It says that there's some safety concerns for our firefighters, and I mean, by implication, I take that to include the public to an extent, obviously. November 21st, we have this motion that fails. December 7th, the OFM writes the letter to council through yourself, obviously, Mr. Mayor, and indicating that a review would be initiated. And January 16th, we have 17 inspectors in our city conducting a review. I mean, and the interesting part that I found, or the concern that I had, was the MOL order of November 2nd had a stipulation that we had to comply with that order by January 27th, which hasn't even reached us yet. And to have this 73 period, I think 73 days from the time of that order to them being present here on January 16th, it just seems very odd, and I trust that's probably what caused you to want to meet with them and draft that letter. But perhaps if I can go in another direction here, I'm not sure if this would be to the CAO or the fire chief, but have we complied with that MOL order that was to be satisfied by January 27th?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, we have complied with that request. And again, for the clarity to the public at large, there's a number of SOGs that were created as a result, and they were done with the association's input through the platoon chiefs to be able to go to the realignment. There was a question about some of the clarity of the language of one of those, some 40-odd SOGs that were put together. So it's not where it was a concern expressed for all of the SOGs. It was for one SOG, and it was only for the that standard operating guideline in terms of just some clarity around the language, and that has been provided. I need to also comment sort of as a corollary to the earlier questioning that was spoken to by the mayor. Equally on administration's side, we had several conversations with the fire marshal's office and with their ministry officials that oversee the fire marshal's office to confirm that, again, it was not because of council bringing them in, it was not because of any immediate sense of safety concerns. They were just doing it under what they call Section 9. We still have not clarity out of what they were looking for in terms of that, but we leave it to them to make that explanation if and when they bring a report forward. But I did need to reiterate, it was done on administration side, and I think the mayor with his diligence wanted to make sure on behalf
of council, on behalf of the community, that it was understood on the community side too, that that's what happened. Long-winded response to your question, but need to, again, put context to it. The SOG in question, the one standard operating guideline in question, has been submitted back to the Ministry of Labour.
Thank you. So I guess we would await some type of a response, but we've done our end of the, our obligations have been satisfied, and it's up to the MWL to determine whether or not those are appropriate or not.
Well, not they're satisfied.
Yes. Yes. Okay, thank you. The portion of the letter which refers to city administration having been cooperative, and Mr. CEO, you referred to that earlier, that they were satisfied with our cooperation. Some of the reports that came in the media after this agenda was produced referred to questions that the the Fire Marshal's office had asked to speak with our local firefighters, and somehow they were denied access, or they were told to direct any inquiries. The association, that is, Firefighters Association, was told to direct those inquiries to our fire chief or yourself, the CAO. Were our firefighters indeed advised that they were not allowed to respond, or that they should not respond to any inquiries by the inspectors of the Ontario Fire Marshal's office?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll respond to that by speaking again in terms of the process that we observed being undertaken throughout their attendance here between January 16th and January 19th. We were fully cooperative, and there was nothing but accolades that were identified in writing and in person by the Fire Marshal and by the 17-member team in terms of the amount of information and access that was provided to them as part of their on-the-ground reviews. I'm not sure where the story came from. In terms of that access, it was everybody. In fact, it was to the point where files that were on site, the team was on first-name basis with everybody at the hall in terms of what they could be able to get for information. And I even had, through our process with our legal counsel being available for the specific interviews and to watch the process, an observation that there was plenty of access that was provided throughout the whole process review. In terms of specifics and interview specifics, the requirement that was provided in terms of the ask of the Fire Marshal's office included a number of documents. So there's 32 categories of documents that were asked for in advance. There was a number of sub-documents relating to that. There was a list of scheduled interviews and interview questions that were provided, and there was arrangements made to set those up. At the end, the specific interviews that were undertaken included 4 individuals that were identified. 2 of them relating to the association, 2 of them were relating to senior management. And those interviews were conducted as scheduled. And the Fire Marshal was indicated that if he wanted more, he would come back and ask if he needed to speak to more individuals, and did in fact do so, and asked for one more individual that was a senior official with the Fire Services Department. But again, access to and cooperation with the 17-member team was full and open. So okay. I'm not sure where those articles came from, and there was no memo. I think the news article I saw said something about a memo coming from the CEO's office. No memo came from the CEO's office indicating as that was described.
Okay, then just to be clear, then there was no memo or letter or email that would have come from your office or any of your staff that would have been asking the firefighters not to answer any questions of the Fire Marshal's office and to direct those to either your office or the fire chief.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, there was an email transmittal as in consultation with the Assistant Fire Marshal and with the team saying, here's the schedule of interviewees that was reduced from 16, I think it was, to 4 because of just the logistics of being able to do it. So there was a generic email that was sent saying, no, these interviews are not going to be undertaken at this time, subject to confirmation if the Fire Marshal wishes to follow up. If you wish to speak, understand further or talk further, by all means, go to the chief or go to the CAO's office. That's the only thing I can think of that's close to what's being described. But again, that was to all individuals, association, and the senior management team for fire services that were in the original interview schedule. At the end, there were 4 interviews scheduled. 2 were association members, 2 were senior management, and the fire marshal subsequent to that requested that 1 additional senior manager be interviewed. All of those 5 interviews took place with legal counsel present on behalf of the city.
So there was about 12 that didn't occur pursuant to that email then? 12 interviews that didn't occur?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 12 interviews that did not take place in person. However, there are questions that relate to those interviews that are being completed and are being provided to the Ontario Fire Marshal's office as per their request.
Would those 12 individuals have been firefighters or?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, they were probably equally broken up on both sides.
Okay. And I'm not sure what the process or protocol would be with this, but on what authority would we be able to, or would city staff be able to direct who could or could not be interviewed by the Ontario Fire Marshal's office?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, again, we did not direct per se. We spoke with the Fire Marshal's office and said in terms of logistics who would be the best individuals, and the 4 were identified out of the 16.
And you're saying that was in conjunction with the Fire Marshal's office?
That was in conversation with the Fire Marshal's office, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano.
Thank you. Your Worship, I don't have any other questions at this time, but I will make some comments in the conclusion.
Well, can you just make the comments now, because
I'd prefer to wait till the end and just follow the usual protocol.
Oh, I think we're
If
near the
I
end,
know some
Councillor
other
Romano.
questions.
Let's just get this on the record, because Councillor Nero has a conflict. He's been trying to get on the record for a while now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I saw this item, I saw it as information. The conversation is delved into the realignment plan, so I'm going to declare conflict on it.
Yeah, I understood. Thank you, Councillor Nero. We'll note that for the record. So we have 2 left on my list, Councillor Butland and Councillor Hoopanen. Councillor Hoopanen was first, Councillor Butland, sorry. Yeah. Oh, sorry, no, it wasn't Councillor Hoopanen, it was Councillor Hollingsworth, I apologize. Yeah.
Thank you. To you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and just clarification, I'm glad to hear again that this review and so forth is not because of any potential safety towards our citizens, so I just want to reemphasize that. Here's my question. From my understanding, I've been just doing some reading for the last few weeks about all this fire safety and so forth. It's my understanding, and I need clarification either from CAO or from our fire chief. From my understanding, Guelph, the city of Guelph, from my reading, has probably the best governing and operating bylaws for a city with regards to fire. And it's also my understanding, talking to the Ontario Fire College, that the Ontario Fire College has very high standards in training firefighters. It's also my understanding that the Ontario side, provincially, there's no true set standards that all municipalities must follow. For example, a hospital, I believe, has set standards that they must follow in order to operate a hospital. But from my understanding, there's no set standards for all municipalities because each municipality, from my understanding, is different. And it's my understanding that the city of Guelph has the best governing bylaws around fire safety right now. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, again, and I would defer to the chief in terms of the specifics relating to this, there are guidelines that relate to firefighting efforts. And those guidelines include minimum standards in terms of a number of pieces, public education, suppression, etc. And it's up to the municipality to set the service level within those guidelines to what it sees as affordable and necessary. In the case of City of Guelph, I wouldn't be able to comment if that was the best in Ontario, but the City of Guelph had a very robust economy, had a very strong financial position, and had a very unique because it was a concentrated area, a geographic piece. So they had some, the city has some specific characteristics that may allow it to have bylaws for a certain, in a certain fashion. For the city of Sault Ste. Marie, like with all other 444 municipalities within Ontario, we are equally challenged by our own geographic, financial, etc. Situations. So the effort is to try and minimize risk within that frame, such that it still allows for affordability, still looks at the minimizing of safety risk, but that safety risk is not just in terms of fire, it's also in terms of EMS, which is what the original plan was designed to do, to be able to try and reallocate within existing budgeted allotments to address public education and training on the fire side, but also the rising number of calls and response time concerns that were becoming critical on the EMS side. So within that frame and within the guidelines made available to the municipality through the province, Sault Ste. Marie had identified a plan and the council has approved that plan.
Thank you. So it was very interesting that there are guidelines, and we are doing our best to follow these guidelines. And as we continue on with the review, we may look at the Guelph, City of Guelph, or may not. But the bottom line is interesting that there's no hard standards set. It's just all guidelines. Thank you.
Councillor Butland.
Yep, just one, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So 16, 18, I've heard up to 22 people came into the city and conducted whatever, it's like a dragnet.
They call it a review.
It's a review, I'm sorry, I misspoke. But that's as an extensive of a review of anything I've ever heard of. That many people. Are these people a part of the fire marshal's office, or are they seconded firefighters from other jurisdictions? And I'll just finish off a couple of questions, and we spent a long time on this one. So this couldn't be labeled as a risk assessment by a different name, or is it's an audit? And the way I read the letter, it sounds like a risk assessment. So we've completed this one, and there's a chance we'll do another one in a year and a half?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland, on your first parts of your questions, the 17 individuals work with the Fire Marshal's office. That said, their backgrounds are very diverse. They're not necessarily in fire services. The Assistant Fire Marshal is, in fact, got a military and policing background. And the number of the reviewers are senior policy advisors or policy advisors that have administrative backgrounds relating to the areas, so that it's not fully fire services personnel. Theirs is, to answer the second part of your question, theirs is exactly that, just an audit, simply collecting information to be able to review the numbers relating to protection of fire services, and that's what they've done, is collected that information, and now they're reviewing it, and we will be awaiting their report as to what that all culminates in, if it is indeed that the Fire Marshal decides that the report's going to be brought forward.
So this could not be, what they've done could not be labeled as a risk assessment.
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland, similar to the discussions that the Mayor had with the Assistant Fire Marshal that we've had with administration, we have been told, we know that they did not come in because there was a consideration that there was a safety risk, safety concern. As per the legislation, they were coming in simply to do a review or an audit.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Bruni put his hand up there. Go ahead, Councillor Bruni.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I thought retired Minister Orzetti requested this fire marshal to come here to do the investigation, or am I wrong on this? I mean, that's what I read in the paper, that he recommended it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, and the minister, I'm sure, was briefed and had some input to it, but at the end of the day, the letter that we received is from the Assistant Fire Marshal, and it's the Fire Marshal's office that makes that brings it forward.
Did Minister Orzetti request the fire marshal to come here? Through you, Mr. Mayor, I cannot speak to whether that was or was not the case. Again, we're simply responding to the December 7th letter that was provided by the Assistant Fire Marshal.
Okay, so that's a lot of questions on that. Councillor Romano, you had some comments you wanted to make?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, if I could just be permitted one small indulgence, one simple little question I forgot.
You've already been permitted a very large indulgence.
Yeah, I appreciate that. With respect to, again, that realignment, we had talked a lot about fire underwriters insurance. Mr. CAO or anybody else in the room, did we ever get contacted by the fire underwriters insurance people in terms of whether or not there's been any type of review and whether or not there would be any potential premium increases in Sault Ste. Marie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, at the present time, there is no formal change. We've had several conversations with the fire underwriters dating back to October of 2015. A review takes place in concert with the underwriters group and with the staff, and there's a final counting of numbers at that time. Right now, that has not taken place.
When you say the review, you meant just the one that just passed with the Ontario Fire Marshals? Or the realignment plan?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, a review with the underwriters group.
As part of realignment? Okay.
The last one that was done was in 1990.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, that's it. So I just have a few comments, and I'll try to summarize here. Since the time of our realignment, October 26, 2015, we spoke, what we were advised of as a council, and I know that it's the message I got and the message that was sent out to the community was, this was supposed to be a fluid plan. This was supposed to be a plan that would last over a 3-year span of time or thereabouts. And we would not be just suddenly, chopping 25% of the service immediately. That it would take some time to implement that changeover. And if ever we saw any problems or concerns, we could always hit the pause button. We can always stop this process at any point in time. Since we've implemented that realignment on October 26th of 15, there have been some other cuts to the services in terms of operational resources, such as boats being sold and that type of thing that affected the water rescue team. Those were all opposed by the Professional Firefighters Association, and there were some concerns about them not having been able to address council since that time, but I understand that that is being rectified. As far as what occurred in this past 3-month time span or the last 80 some odd days, again, to reiterate, November 2nd, we get this MOL order, Ministry of Labor order. November 21st, we have a resolution that fails for an expedited comprehensive risk assessment. And suddenly, December 7th, we get an order from the OFM or a letter from the OFM, Ontario Fire Marshal's Office, that they're coming to our community to conduct an audit or a review of our department. Given your worship's comments and concerns that were raised in your letter of January 17th, clearly you identified an issue. Clearly we've all identified an issue. If it's not done, if we haven't asked you guys to come and you only come otherwise when there's a public safety threat, well, are you here because there's a public safety threat? And that causes certainly myself and I think the community at large and I think all of us a great deal of concern, and clearly that was the reason for the letter, and I thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. The concern I have is that the quickness of this whole process, and I don't mean to attack any of our government officials, but we're talking within 73 days of November 2nd, that MOL order, they're here in Sault Ste. Marie with, as Councillor Butlin referred to, some type of a dragnet operation. Certainly a lot of inspectors have traveled here. That's 17 people that came to Sault Ste. Marie who left their families behind, who had to spend money on hotel rooms, restaurants, etc. I suppose it was good for our local economy for a short period of time, the 3 days while it lasted. But it seems awfully odd to me and awfully concerning to me that within such a short period of time of that MOL order, that they're here. And it's just on the heels of us not having taken that opportunity to do that comprehensive risk assessment, which from what we saw in previous packages, I believe it was in February of this year, last year, I apologize. often you see these recommendations that a city obtain a comprehensive risk assessment when the fire marshal's reviews have been conducted in the past. So all of that in mind, I am concerned about this language, and I know I referred to it, or we refer to it as hair splitting. And I find it hard to believe, especially given your letter does refer to the language used in the legislation of a serious public safety concern, but something doesn't seem right to me. Something doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And to have all of these inspectors here in such a short time frame makes me look back at that meeting we had on October 26th where we talked about if this wasn't a simple, if we ran into any problems, that this was supposed to be a simple fluid plan, and we'd be able to press the pause button at any point in time. I look at this process now and I said, we still have almost 2 years to go, or a year and a half before we reach the conclusion. We've got a few months until the March timeframe where we expect to see a report back from the fire marshal's office. I wonder, given all of these circumstances, if maybe it is time for us to hit the pause button, or at least look at the option of doing that until we get this report back from the OFM, the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office, in approximately March of this year. It would seem to be a very strange set of circumstances and causes me a great deal of concern when I think back to what we did in October of 15 and all that has transpired in the last 80 days or so. Food for thought, I suppose.
Okay, any other matters on the consent agenda, Council? No other matters on the consent agenda. Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, Black Road widening project report, I just questioned through you to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, just to be, first of all, thank you for the report. I know most of the information was provided in the past. However, I did want to, the purpose of the resolution recently was just to bring the issue to light again because it is critical. Just to be clear through your report that if we do not get funding through connecting links, we as a city are looking at about a $5.5 million spend to get that Black Road widened, just to confirm that.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes, we're pretty much certain that we won't be getting connecting link funding for this project, and it's about a $5.5 million capital project that the city will have to do within the next few years.
Okay. I just, if I might, just quickly, it's I said it during the original resolution, and I say it again. I think it's absurd that that we're right in the middle of the Trans-Canada Highway. There's trans-provincial traffic accessing our roads, and yet the provincial government doesn't see fit to pay for this road widening. Ideally, it would have been nice to have a bypass like the other communities, the major communities in Northern Ontario, but the government doesn't see fit to provide us that funding. One of the things you had pointed out to me as well, Mr. Elliott, is that along with the fact that they won't pay for that, all the signage that directs trans-provincial traffic through Sault Ste. Marie, all the road signage is funded through the city budget. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes, that and winter maintenance and line painting, everything associated with maintenance and upkeep of the road is the city's expense. The Connecting Link program provides, as I said in the report, a fairly generous 90% of capital cost for reconstruction or resurfacing projects. But that's the only thing that the Connecting Link program provides to the city.
Yeah, it's really frustrating for me, and I know when the resolution came forward, there was some doubts around the table from City Council, but I'm just going to reiterate again that we as a council need to get our head around the fact that if we don't get the funding for this, we're looking at a $5.5 million spend. Some people will argue that we don't need it, but if we don't upgrade that road, it's at the very least is going to have to be resurfaced at some point because most roads within the community are not designed for heavy trans-provincial traffic. So whether you argue it should be widened or not, we're still looking at huge costs to resurface it. So at a time when we're trying to save money, we're looking at a multi-million-dollar spend, and we're going to have to get our head around the fact that we're going to have to spend this money at some point in our budget. So I encourage council to support the effort and understand that this is a huge expense and the government needs to come forward. Thank you.
On the same matter? Okay. Any other matters on the same matter, Councilor Fata? Go ahead.
Mayor, no, I just want to just make sure that I understand this correctly. The funds for this, for the Connecting Link are definitely not coming? Are we 100% certain that that money will not be coming now or in the foreseeable future?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata, I'm certain that we're not going to get a grant, a Connecting Link grant for the Black Road widening between McNabb and Second Line. We have another project in the books now to resurface Second Line west of North Street. That's a resurfacing project. It's eligible. The application is in. We hope to get funding to resurface that this year. So we do have projects in the queue for resurfacing projects for Connecting Link funds. But the Black Road project the widening of Black Road between McNabb and Second Line is not eligible.
So we would be paying for it just like we would for any ordinary street in Sault Ste. Marie, correct?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata, that's correct. And as the report says, it was a surprise to us because there were widening projects in the past that they funded. Even Black Road south of McNabb, that was a Connecting Link project when we widened it from 2 lanes to 5. So that was, it was a surprise to us. You're going to have to blend this project into a future capital works project. Other projects will be deferred, and we would prioritize this against other projects and do it with our own funds.
If I may ask you one more question. In terms, and I know this has to do, and I'm assuming this has to do with engineering, and it's not my expertise, but you're suggesting that we need to do Black Road from an engineering perspective, right? If I told you that I think Johnson Avenue and First Avenue is more important to the taxpayers of this city, how would you respond by saying Black Road is, in fact, more important?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata, we have several classes of roads that we reconstruct. There's arteries, there's collectors, and there's local streets, and Johnson Street is a local street. We do some local streets each year. We fit those streets in there, but we need to maintain our arteries as well because they serve the most vehicles. Black Road is going to be approaching 20,000 vehicles a day, and it is the Trans-Canada Highway, and it is our responsibility to maintain it. So in order for traffic to function properly in the city, it's our opinion that we need to proceed with the widening of Black Road.
Just one more question.
Sure.
Can you just refresh our memories about Second Avenue, Second Line, what you're just referring to as having to be resurfaced? You just made reference to Second Line being resurfaced from from North Street to People's Road. That is correct? That was what you were just talking about?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata, the 2017 application for Connecting Link funds was for resurfacing Second Line at 2 portions, from Carman to North, and between Great Northern Road and Old Garden River Road. Those 2 sections are this year's application for resurfacing. We hope to get a positive answer to that. We hope to be resurfacing those this summer with Connecting Link funds.
No, the reason I'm bringing that up is because, as I recall, that area of Second Line wasn't done too long ago. Is there anything there that reflects on the quality of the work done on that area that you're now saying has to be resurfaced?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata, if memory serves, I believe that portion of the hill west of North Street, between North and Carman Street, is around mid-90s. That in excess of 20. The other portion, the portion between and Old Garden River Road, has been resurfaced in the past, and those projects only tend to last 10 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Manor, you had something else in the Black Road widening?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've already fallen on the sword, so to speak, once with this before, but I'm wondering if this would be, and perhaps Michelle could assist, or our CEO, or Mr. Elliott, is this a project that we can consider looking at debt to finance that project, to be blunt. Is this something that we would consider a capital expense, where we can look at using our positive debt position to finance said work and not have to compromise other capital projects down the road, but still get what is really a necessary project completed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, I'll turn it to the CFO Treasurer to speak in terms of the financial implications. But again, administration would not recommend the use of debt for road projects just because of the cyclical nature of them. All it's doing is just pushing the difficulty down the path, and then we would have to make it up at a later juncture.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, we'll be looking at the entire financing of the roads and our whole capital budget when we reforecast again for the 2018 budget year. But the CAO's comments is the path that we take regarding roads, and that it's more of an operating item. We'll be looking at, like I said, all the additional funding, including grants. We do have an increase in our OCIF funding, as was noted in Mr. Elliott's report, which is going to assist us with some of our other road projects. So again, once we present our whole capital budget, we'll look at the financing of the capital budget as a whole.
Perhaps just one follow-up. How do we draw a distinction between a capital project like a road that we have to widen, and we'll have to, I trust the nature, and maybe I'm not appreciating this, but down the road it's going to be repaired, the road, and therefore it's a cyclical expense? Is that how we justify it not fitting into that type of a one-time expenditure that we could use debt to finance? Is that I don't think I appreciated that from budget time, but is that what we're referring to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, yes, that's the basic gist of it. Because the roads are ongoing, we always have the same amount that we put year after year after year. It becomes part of our operating budget. Even though it's a capital item, it's funded through normal operations.
But forgive me, but when we did things like looking at the window replacement of the building or a roof replacement here or there, what's the difference? I mean, at those times we're looking at it and we're saying, hey, we can use debt to finance those projects. Why can't we? Those are cyclical. We'll always have to change a window in another so many years.
The amount of cyclical funding that's available for the office buildings and other infrastructure of that nature is a set amount. And if we have a project that exceeds that amount, then we look at debt financing and then funding that debt with the amount that we have allocated in the operating budget. So there is still an operating budget piece in there.
Is it something that we will nonetheless keep an open mind to, just when looking at these things, like as we look at budget for 2018, and I mean, is this something we can at least think about?
We always keep an open mind when we do our capital budget, and we look for the best way of funding all of our projects based on the grants that we have and the funding available.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on Black Road widening? Okay, no one else on Black Road widening. Councillor Hollingsworth, do you have something else on the consent agenda? Oh, on Black Road, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Is there an appeal process? Is there something that we can do to show evidence that's not local traffic? Is there an appeal process that we can go with?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I'm not aware of any opportunities for us to appeal to the MTO for not giving us connecting link funds.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, as a corollary to Mr. Elliott's comments, there is no appeal process per se. Again, the province has a defined process within its own administration for going through and making determinations based on priorities and projects that are put in front of it, and it funds accordingly and then provides the information to the respective applicants as to those decisions. That said, we do as administration have opportunities through other avenues to reach out to our administrative counterparts provincially and indicate and get feedback on as to why our project didn't make the grade on others, so we could improve in terms of future applications under whether it's connecting links or any program. And so it's through that process that we still bring to light the interests of the municipality in terms of roads and projects like the Black Road widening. The final piece is that we do have opportunities through the various associations, whether it be AMO, whether it be other advocacy groups that work on behalf of municipalities of looking for increasing envelopes so as to be able to maximize, and we do that in terms of our discussions with ministers' briefings, delegations, et cetera, through those associations. On lateral riding, Councillor Hipponen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a comment. The Ministry of Transportation, the MTO Connecting Links program, it clearly states in there that Sault Ste. Marie is provincial highway, part of Trunk Road, Black Road, Second Line, Eastern Great Northern Road, and it's 19.4 lengths in kilometers as a connecting link. So I cannot understand why we were turned down. I'm having a really hard time understanding that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hupinen, again, we cannot comment on what the final rationale was for the envelope that was provided by the province in terms of its allocation out. What we did receive has been provided in the package before you and in previous packages, indicating that their belief was that the traffic counts did not justify that widening and felt that the local traffic. We disagree. However, again, it's incumbent, it's the province that makes the allocation determinations. We can only just indicate to them that we have a difference of opinion.
Thank you. With all due respect, Mr. CEO, I agree with what you're saying, but all they had to do was come here and take a look and stand there for one day. So I'm just not really super happy with it. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hupinen. Any other matters in the consent agenda, Council? Councillor Romano.
If I could ask that we pull item 6.4, please.
6.4.
Retention of restructuring
Okay.
lawyer fee.
That'll be pulled from consent. Any other matters in the consent agenda? Councillor Fada.
6.1.2.
City bylaw enforcement or AMO 27 pre-budget submission?
2007.
Go ahead, Councillor Fada.
I just want to have a brief discussion on this, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
In terms of the long-term financial sustainability, what I am seeing here is, unless I'm overreacting, it is very disturbing. When I see things like the average, if a person right now is paying somewhere around $3,000 a year in taxes, by the year 2025, that same person might be paying somewhere around $6,700.
Yeah, let's just be clear. Just so the people at home, though, Councillor Fada, are aware of what you're referring to. You're referring to the Association of Municipality of Ontario's paper. You're not referring to numbers that are specific to Sault Ste. Marie.
I'm speaking only to the generalities of the report. Yeah.
I understand.
I know that's not specific to Sault Ste. Marie.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize what you'd be speaking to right now.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Just wanted to clarify.
I think something has. I mean, obviously, the big part that stands out in my mind when I read that is that the issue of the arbitration that's not being resolved in terms of fire and police and that whole aspect of this report is obviously disturbing, especially when we see that nothing is happening. In terms of the total shortfall, which again is the report for the province, I mean the shortfall of $4.9 billion. I just want to be able to understand clearly what I think I'm reading here. Maybe the CEO can comment. I just want to, the numbers I'm reading here are really quite disturbing. And on top of everything else that's going on through this report, we have our own local issues, which compounds the problem even more. So this has to be disturbing to more than just me, I hope.
Well, I think the reports from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Councillor Turcot's been there for, well, I wouldn't say 100 years, Councillor Turcot, but been there for a lot of years and has been lobbying there. Maybe, I mean, the CEO is welcome to answer this question, but maybe Councillor Turcot can offer his perspective on what AMO's been doing, because obviously, Councillor Fada, I think everybody agrees, municipalities across the province are challenged, and their resources are challenged. So you can see it demonstrably in the AMO report. And these are issues, you're right to say, they've been grappling with for a while. Councillor Turcot?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what you see is what people always say, what does AMO really do? This is just one of the many files that I don't have my list with me, but everything from asset management to climate change, Councillor Fada, to federal gas tax fund, interest arbitration, Municipal Act review, OMB review, and on and on. This is our latest project, which I've been very honored to be part of for the last couple of years with my fellow politicians from around the province. And this is what we have a seat, all of us here through MAMO, with the province of Ontario. It's called the Memorandum of Agreement, MOU. And Ontario, but the number one response from the municipality of Ontario and the submissions was infrastructure. And we just talked about that with the third line and the bypass. This is number one by far. And any other discussion that we have at the table at AMO, and yes, and that's what we're telling the province, that going forward, the municipality is going to have problems. And this is where we are right now. Unless the CAO has something else to add to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata. Again, as Councillor Turco has indicated, through AMO is where one of the many avenues that we talked about in terms of advocacy can be brought up, and there's several items, as Councillor Turco indicated, infrastructure is one of the main ones that's been identified and has been for the last few years. In terms of interest arbitration, yes, there is great concern. I think the position paper, if I recall the numbers correctly, identified that if it was that the fire and police received from pay increases consistent with the rest of the municipal collective bargaining units between 2010 2014, the amount would have been somewhere in the order of $485 million provincially less in terms of costs. Those are the types of position papers, those are the types of research efforts that are made to be able to support the advocacy that AMO provides to the province. Again, for this particular document, it is a 2017 budget submission that's being looked at from AMO to go into the 2017 budget process for the province of Ontario. And so they've identified a number of items, infrastructure being the main one, but certainly others, including interest arbitration, are also referenced and backed up through the research that they provide.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. What I am seeing through this, and of course I see things differently sometimes than some people, but I see this a great deal of conversation and very little action. And I say that because we just had a person here at council talking about a tire plant that needs expediency in terms of getting response from the Ministry of the Environment, getting things done so that they can proceed with what he proposes to do, which is expand the plant, create jobs, but yet they're waiting for the government, for the minister, and I have no idea why these delays occur, but it seems like that seems to be the common practice. I really don't understand why these things take forever. And this issue with arbitration, we've been talking about that for a great deal of time. Why is there no action on these things, Mr. Mayor? I'm just making that as a comment.
I recognize it's rhetorical.
It's frustrating, Mr. Mayor, because we don't see any action. These are major issues. They're suggesting that between property taxes and user fees, some people's taxes are going to go up for 8% a year. Not necessarily Sault Ste. Marie. It might only be 7% in Sault Ste. Marie.
Let's be clear about that. So you're referring to a paper that isn't Sault Ste. Marie specific.
I understand,
I don't want
but
people watching getting the impression that their taxes are going to go up. We just got to be careful, Councillor Fata, because when we sit here and we communicate, we're communicating to the community, and they're hearing what we're saying, and we don't want to create any alarm. So you're reading from a paper from AMO, which suggests that if municipalities don't get help, property taxes are going to hurt.
When are we going to see action, Mr. Mayor?
From me, or just you speaking generally from the province?
I'm talking about the province.
Well, have you come to the AMO conference in the last couple of years, Councillor Fata?
I've only gone to the ones that are here, so I've saved the taxpayers about $2,000 a year each time that I didn't go out of town, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I suggest that you come, Councillor Fata, and you'll have an opportunity when you're there to meet with people, and you can raise that issue with the people that are in a position to actually act. I certainly put these issues on the radar every chance I get. They're complex issues. The one you're dealing with respect to collective bargaining is a very complex issue, and you could rest assured that the fine folks who staff our police departments and staff our fire departments have very different positions than we would have on whether that system's working or not. These are political issues, and, sometimes it takes a lot to solve a political issue, and it's probably one of the reasons why you haven't seen a resolution on that one. So you've been here for 10 years, Councillor Fata, and if you want to work with me over the next 2 years to try and solve some of these, I'm happy to work with you. But to answer your specific questions tonight as to why you haven't seen any action in the last while, you'd be in a better position to answer that than I would be.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we should go on a trip together, Councillor Fata. Anybody else on the consent agenda? Seeing none, thank you, Council. We'll read the consent motion. We have separated one item from the consent agenda, 6.4.
I have a
Madam Clerk?
motion by Councillors Christian and Romano, resolved that all items listed under date January 23, 2017, Agenda Item 6, Consent Agenda, be approved as recommended, save and accept Agenda Item 6.4.
All in favor? Carried. So will we deal with 6.4 now, Madam Clerk?
Yes, and we do have a motion to postpone, which should be read before debate of the main.
So, yeah, I think what we need to do is read the main motion, and then you'll read the motion to postpone. So there's a motion to defer, a motion to postpone. So that, we're going to deal with that motion first, because obviously if that motion carries, we're not going to debate the main motion. No, it's deferral. It's a motion to defer. So what we're going to do is we're going to read the main motion, and then we're going to read the deferral. Before we debate the main motion, we're going to read the deferral motion. And we'll debate the deferral motion.
Okay.
Sure.
So if you have questions before you want to vote on deferral, we'll have that opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, on the deferral, we'll have somebody speak in favor of the deferral and somebody speak against the deferral. You can ask some questions and we'll deal with that.
The main motion was moved by Councillor Butland and seconded by Councillor Romano. Councillor Kompotic has a conflict. Can I have somebody else as a seconder?
On the main motion?
On the main, Myers?
Councillor Myers.
A motion by Councillors Butland and Myers, resolved that the report of the Chief Administrative Officer dated January 23, 2017, concerning the approval of an additional $75,000 to the upset limit for the services of a restructuring lawyer to represent the city's interest in the CCAA protection proceedings of SR Steel Algoma Inc. be approved, and that the services be funded from the contingency reserve. And then we have a motion by Councillors Romano and Bruni, whereas Council has been asked on January 23, 2017, to approve a further retainer payment to our legal counsel assisting us in the CCAA proceedings involving SR Steel Algoma in the amount of $75,000, in addition to the $225,000 already paid. And whereas it is prudent of this council to be cautious of unnecessary and fruitless spending that may offer no legitimate return on investment to the residents of the city of Sault Ste. Marie, and whereas any indication by the corporation of the city of Sault Ste. Marie that we should be prepared to negotiate on the repayment of the taxes owed to us, for which we already hold priority status by virtue of statutory authority for said priority, would be detrimental to the city being able to actively pursue the full amount of tax arrears presently owing to the city. And whereas this council has never seen any accounts from our legal counsel that explains on a line-by-line basis the costs that we have expended to date that appear, based on the January 23, 2017 request from staff, to have reached $225,000 of Sault Ste. Marie taxpayers' money. And whereas said accounts should be reviewed to ensure we as a council make an informed decision as to what we can hope to receive for the further expenditure of an additional $75,000 and how our last $225,000 has been spent. Therefore, be it resolved that in the spirit of providing openness and transparency to the taxpayers of Sault Ste. Marie, which we serve, that this request for a further $75,000 be postponed, and that staff provide council at our next meeting with a copy of the detailed itemized line-by-line accounts that have been provided to the corporation of the city of Sault Ste. Marie from our legal counsel, and a copy of our retainer agreement or agreements, and a copy of the correspondence and opinion letter from legal counsel advising us as to the costs associated with any potential future steps or options moving forward and costs of same.
Okay, so we'll take questions now so council can inform itself, and then we'll debate the motion. So Councillor Myers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my first question is to our Chief Financial Officer in terms of our contingency fund. Could you please tell me, Ms. Shao, what our balance at this time is in the contingency fund that would be, where the $75,000 request would come from?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers, there's approximately $1 million of uncommitted funds in our contingency reserve.
That's where this 75,000 would be coming from?
Correct.
And it's obviously an appropriate use of those funds?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. My second question would be, I don't know whether it's directed to the CAO or our solicitor, Mr. Mayor, but it's around, I'm quite interested to understand the timelines and the urgency of the request, whether by deferring and delaying for 2 weeks, it would be in any way detrimental?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers, I'll start and then I'll look to the city solicitor if there's anything she wishes to add. As I think everybody is aware, the latest deadline is January 27th for the determination of the process for the CCAA. As we lead up to that date, and again, we've had situations where those dates have been stayed, but right now the standing one is January 27th of 2017. So there is an urgency because as we lead up to that date, there's significant outreaches happening and significant amount of activity happening in terms of the various parties putting in motions, putting in information requests, and ourselves in terms of our taxes being able to identify where it is that there might be some proposals made by the term lenders in terms of what they could or could not pay as part of the process that we need to be involved in, we need to be part of. A second piece to that is the Port of Algoma. But again, really the date is the key one, is the January 27th. And we have now exhausted funds to date, so a deferral or a delay is just simply going to exacerbate our ability to work successfully within that process.
And one last question would be probably also to you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO, and that is, can you tell me what the least amount is that we might expect to recover through this process in terms of outstanding taxes? I realize it's a bit of a moving target with all kinds of factors, but what would be the least amount of money that we are going after in terms of why we're even in this process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers, we're saying there's no least amount, but in terms of the amounts to date, the total is in the order of $21.9 million. And effective March 6th, there's another installment that's intended. It's approximately $1.8 million, which we expect is not going to be paid. And so this amount of money that would, if approved tonight, would mean $300,000 in legal fees, is to be able to recover somewhere in the order of approximately $24 million in taxes owed. And we expect to receive that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I will have comment. I don't know whether it should be now or later.
No, we're just asking questions now.
Because I have okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for staff on this? I have Hollingsworth. Yeah, go ahead, Hollingsworth. Councilor Hollingsworth.
My wardie took my question, so well done, wardie. But for those at home, I know that a couple of constituents have asked me to clarify, have we considered in the past local lawyers, yes or no, and why not? But again, wardie, you think good questions.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, as identified in previous reports, we went through a process that solicited from all avenues, including local legal counsel, before we came to the decision with Aaron Bearless. Remember, all of the proceedings are in Toronto, so any local person would have to charge us extra monies to be able to make the trip down to Toronto to be able to identify there. That was not the determination through our process, or procurement process. It was a solicitation of we started out with about 25 companies that we knew had expertise in this field. It was pared down to, I think it was 6 that were then asked to provide their quotes, and from that we went with the current group, which is Aaron Bearless. So it was an open process that was identified and undertaken.
Okay, so we have Councillor Romano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure you would agree with me, Mr. Mayor, that we can make a lot of trips down to Toronto for $225,000, but we'll cross that bridge in short order. Perhaps, Mr. CAO, I'll put this question to you. Sorry to keep you in the hot seat for so long today, but I do have some questions on this. You would confirm that we do have a guaranteed, and actually perhaps our legal counsel is really in a better position to answer this as well. that as a municipality, given that it's tax money, we have statutory priority status. Before we ever hired a lawyer in this matter, we always had priority status, the highest priority we could get, given that we were a municipality and it was taxes owed to us.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Romano, we enjoy priority status for taxes, yes.
Okay. We always knew that, of course, to be the case even before we hired Airden Burles as our legal counsel.
And again, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Romano, that's correct.
Now, so far, the initial retainer we paid was a $175,000 retainer to Airden Burles on February 22nd, 2016. And in exchange, so far, what we are aware of is that we received, a motion was brought, and in the process of bringing that motion, affidavits were prepared, examinations on those affidavits were completed, and that seems to have been somewhere to in the neighborhood of $175,000 on cost. Is that accurate? That motion was heard, I understand, on June of 2016.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Romano, to be honest, I'm not keeping a tab of what, but yes, that sounds right.
Okay.
I mean, people are keeping tab, finance is keeping tab, and I'm just more concerned about the substance of it rather than the financing of it.
Understood. Now, just for everybody's clarity at home, we talk about motions and affidavits and cross exams, and maybe people aren't aware. So we always knew we would be, given our priority status, we know that when this process of CCA comes to a conclusion, we are first on the list to get paid out of whatever monies are left in the pot after the CCA is done. That's an accurate reflection?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, yes, that's my understanding of how municipal tax law works, but we do have a unique decision that we have to work around where that wasn't the case at the motion.
Okay. And the motion in and of itself that was brought in June of 2016 that we were unsuccessful with, our lawyers lost that motion. It was a motion to get paid in advance of CCAA being concluded, before the end date.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, it was to line up what taxes we would be getting and when we would be getting them. It wasn't for a prepayment. It was just to put our foot in the door, yes.
So it was just to confirm that we were going to get what we were going to get when we were going to get it.
Yes.
Well, there was also an order that the ongoing taxes, as in the current taxes, be paid to us.
Right.
Notwithstanding that order, those taxes weren't being paid to us. So we went and said, there's a court order saying that the taxes have to be paid for us, pay the taxes, and notwithstanding that, we didn't receive them.
Okay. So, and as we understand it, that motion, which in essence doesn't compromise our ultimate end date, that we still have priority status, but we spent $175,000 on this law firm to do that for us.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, just as the Mayor has identified, that argument was made unsuccessfly because our taxes weren't paid, and the court endorsed that. So it is a little bit of an enigma.
Right, I understand that. Okay, so we, of course, still have the same priority status we always had. That's never changed, and it never will change. Fair? Well, let's just say we still have it, and it can't, and it's not.
You're going down a kind of a difficult legal road here, Councillor Meno. Maybe the answer is, I think your questions presuppose that we can do nothing and still get paid on our taxes. Is that what you're asking?
I don't want to say nothing, but certainly we have priority status in law, and it cannot be taken away from us as a municipality unless we forfeit it.
Well,
or assign it somewhere else.
I don't know if legal's going to feel like they're in a position to answer that question, but again, your presumption is no matter what we do, a judge couldn't determine that our taxes weren't paid. And I think what legal's saying to you is a judge has already determined in one instance, albeit for a short term, that our taxes wouldn't be paid. So it could very well be that a judge determines somewhere down the road, if we don't make representations, that our taxes aren't going to be paid. But, so I think the question is, does our legal department and our senior city staff feel like we have to make representations during these proceedings?
Okay. So I'll move on from that, and I'll try to return to that at the end of my comments and before we actually, I guess, debate the motion. in August of 2016, August 22nd, we were asked by staff to approve a $100,000 further retainer payment, but we reduced that to $50,000. Now, with respect to that further $50,000, there hasn't been any motions, there hasn't been anything done, and I know I stomped my feet and that sort of thing at that meeting a great deal about this, and raised the concern that really there was nothing perceived to be being done in the near future other than just monitoring the process and opening mail. Did we miss something? Was there something else in addition to that process that has been done? As far as I understand it, there has been no motions brought, there has been no argument. I'm trying to figure out how we've spent $50,000 or how our lawyers have spent $50,000 since August of 2016.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, I'm aware that there was a list of issues that's being prepared and has been prepared in view to the tax matter, that we would actually get our taxes paid. And in terms of an itemized list of what actions our lawyers have taken and the number of conference calls we've had back and forth, I don't have that before me tonight, but we can certainly provide it.
Okay, thank you. The concern I have right now, and I guess it's an unfair question, but we've spent $225,000 to date, and in essence, we have nothing to show for it, no way to recuperate that $225,000, and there's probably a lot we could have used that money for. I mean, that's fine, that's really not fair, but I'll move on. Now, as far as the what we expect to happen in the near future now, we're being asked for another $75,000, or we're being asked to pass a further $75,000 being paid to Aird & Burles. Now, Aird & Burles is the same firm that represents one of the DIP lenders?
No.
Okay, or there was, I know there was some kind of a Chinese wall there, and they represented one of the other participants.
That party's no longer, as we understand, party to the proceeding.
Okay. One of the greatest concerns, and I've addressed it along with Councillor Bruni, we've addressed this directly in the resolution before you all for a deferral. Implicit in that particular documentation, and perhaps I'll put this question to you, Mr. CAO, in the later portion of the summary or report to council, it says, further, city staff expects that the city will be brought into negotiations, and if an agreement is reached, there will necessarily be significant work required to finalize any agreement or final package. Now, forgive me for this, but we've already spent $225,000 and really gotten nowhere with it. We're looking at another $75,000 to spend to recover monies that we have priority status in law over. We already have the priority status. The way I'm reading this is, to me, implicit in this statement is that we're prepared to take less money. I can't imagine how we can ever enter into any type of retainer with their firm where we're specifically indicating that we're prepared to negotiate what's already in law owed to us. I'm confused. It seems like a very odd way to approach this process, that we're already willing to say, hey, we're ready to negotiate for what is already owed to us. I think it would be, all I have to say, this is already our money. It's already owed to us. We already have priority status in law. Why would we be negotiating what's owed to us already?
There's $1.2 billion owed to people. $1.2 billion. There's a whole whackload of people who are not going to be paid anything. We have never gave any indication that we would accept any less than the full amount owed. But this is a very complex legal process with creditors in it that are owed to the tune of $1.2 billion. It's not as simple as I think you're presenting it here. But just to be clear, for anybody who are watching, we've not taken the position ever that we would take less than what is owed to us.
And I appreciate that, and that's not my intention. But when I read that, it caused me immediately looking at it to say, whoa. I mean, if I was on the other side and I saw that, I would say to myself, okay, well, they're prepared to take a hit. They're prepared to take a haircut on this. It just doesn't seem like a very tactical, it doesn't seem like a sound approach. to be concerned about spending money on negotiations that we don't even know we're in. Right now, we have that priority status, and I know, Mr. Mayor, you held a similar opinion to me at the last occasion on the overall, and I know now I'm taking this in another direction. here,
Councilor
but-
Mann, we got to land the plane on this.
Yeah, and I'm at the conclusion here. My concern is this, and perhaps just another question for legal counsel. In previous proceedings, I'm not sure how far back your time with the city went in the previous times that we had Algoma Steel, the then Algoma Steel that went through restructuring and bankruptcy proceedings.
That's my youthful appearance.
Thank you,
Councilor Romano.
appreciate it.
Can we get on with this, please, Councilor?
So, have we ever hired restructuring lawyers before? As far as I know, we have never hired restructuring lawyers in the past.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, nor have we ever gone through a CCAA proceeding. There's been different things that have been put forward, but not a CCAA.
Okay. And is there, in terms of this concern on the timing, and I'll put this to both yourself, Ms. Kenny, or you, Mr. Horseman. I recognize that we're approaching that end of January timeframe, and that's going to expire beyond our next meeting. Can we not have a special meeting of council that would at least reflect to us some of this information? Yeah, I understand that. Thank you. I still am not content to spend $75,000 to pay a retainer when we have never once seen, and the nature of the resolution that people, if my...
Okay, so Councilor Myers is asking a procedural question. Councilor Romano, you are making representations. So on a deferral, one party, the mover, makes representations in favor of it. You're doing that, finish doing that, and then we'll have somebody make representations opposed to it if somebody wants to, and then we'll call the vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
So it's correct that throughout this process, we have never seen any of the accounts to show what we've received for $225,000 to date. And wouldn't that help us in making an informed decision as to whether we want to spend another $75,000?
Well, do you want to speak to that, City Solicitor?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, we haven't been asked for it, and we've retained outside counsel for a host of things. We can provide it. We provide sort of a summary, sometimes in caucus and sometimes in open, about the end game and status and to where we're at. And the ask tonight does not mean that we will go to the edge of that. It's just to have it there, because our expectation is if history repeats, as I think it will, what's going to happen is it's going to be a whole lot of nothing until the end of January, where we're going to have to move very, very quickly, and we're going to be asked to weigh in on different agreements that are put forward, counter agreements, and to make sure that our interest, and really the taxpayers' interest, is protected. If we don't have that money, yes, a special meeting will be necessary. I thought it would be expedient to do it tonight.
Thank you. And certainly I would assume we have a retainer agreement. We probably have, well, let's go point by point here. We have a retainer agreement.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't here when they were originally retained. I'm not sure of that, how they were retained.
Certainly there must be a retainer agreement.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe there is one. I would have to look to the deputy solicitor who was responsible for putting that through.
We approved their retainer through council.
Right.
So, but I find kind of a lot of these questions, Councilor, very administrative. Like, when would we ever look at and audit a legal bill? Like, it doesn't seem like a governance role to audit the legal bill. It's a question of whether we are comfortable spending these resources in this legal proceeding. And that's like the broader, larger question. If you're not comfortable spending these resources in this legal proceeding, I can respect that, and that's your position. But I don't think we've ever, and I couldn't see why we would, ever audit a legal bill at council and go through a legal bill line by line. City staff does that on our behalf on a daily basis. And I think to some degree, we have to trust that when they're authorized to do something, they're doing it properly. So I can't imagine convening a council meeting to review the legal bills. I would hope that if the legal bills were untoward or there was something wrong, that the city solicitor would be addressing that, directly with our lawyer or with us in caucus. But in lieu of them saying that they're concerned about it, I don't see how we'd ask for those.
And I guess that's a decision for council, obviously. My concern is I cannot appreciate how we've now expended $225,000 and all that has been substantively done is a motion. And that just perplexes me to no end. So I'm asking,
Yeah, we're getting really,
Yeah,
what's that,
so-
Councillor?
so
We're
I'm
getting really
asking,
repetitive. So can we just close the door on this, Councillor? Mann, and you can
absolutely,
make
I
your
will
recommendations?
close up on one last question, just further to your comments. Has the account or the various accounts that have been provided by this law firm to us, have they ever been reviewed on a line-by-line basis to determine the adequacy or appropriateness or compared to other law firms or other work we have done?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, when we get a bill, it's reviewed by my staff, by Melanie, by me. It can't be signed by just Melanie. Melanie signs it, I sign it, the CAO signs it, and if there's any question, we've called, and we have called them back and said, what was that in relation to? And, you know, can you, and since we've retained this firm, I can tell you that we've had regular phone calls with them, and it's an awkward phone call to have, as you can imagine, to say, we cannot exceed this amount. Council will not allow it. If you go a nickel over, you need to call us. If you're looking at that, you need to call us. And they have been extremely amenable to that.
Okay, and then the last question, do we have an opinion letter, something in writing that is identifying to us why, that the amount they require is $75,000 and the reason why and what the options are moving forward? I would assume, again, that's from a practice perspective, would seem to make sense. They're going to be giving us some options.
The law firm didn't ask for $75,000. It is our city staff asking for us to authorize a budget of that money. The law firm didn't write to us and say, give us $75,000 or this is what you need to give us to retain us. It's our staff coming to us saying, can you authorize this expenditure so as we go, you know, we're there. And if you'll recall, at the last council meeting, the same thing happened, and my suggestion was that we authorize a lower expenditure. Not because I don't believe in being in this process or being part of it, I just thought that, you know, if it was a lower expenditure, then they would have to come back. This council at the last meeting didn't think that was wise, and this council at the last meeting said, you got to give them the whole amount they're looking for, and that's what we did. And they've spent that now, and they're back here. But this isn't the law firm writing to us saying we need 75 grand to keep on going.
All right,
This is just them looking for the authority to spend the money.
I don't have any questions, so other than, you know, 15 to 30 seconds comments, I don't have any questions.
Okay,
And I mean that.
Well, you can make your 15-second comments in favor of the deferral, and then I'm going to take comments against the deferral, and then we're going to go to the main motion if the deferral doesn't carry.
I think it's necessary for us to press the pause button on this expenditure of $75,000. I was actively against the original $175,000. Thought we could have dealt with local council on this matter. I was against spending the further $50,000 or $100,000 we were asked to spend in August of 16. I'm definitely against this $75,000 right now until I have some more information that supports what we're going to get for $75,000. At this stage, it really appears that to be able to just monitor what's happening, receive correspondence, and potentially participate in negotiations, I don't see any value in the $75,000, and certainly we have no return on investment in the $225,000 we spent to date.
Does anybody want to speak against the deferral? Councillor Myers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think there's anyone sitting in this room tonight that doesn't want to have more information, but quite frankly, gratefully, I'm not a lawyer. I'm simply a city councillor that's here representing the residents of Ward 2 and keeping in mind the entire community. I think that it behooves us to trust our staff. We have staff that are professionals at what they do, and they are the municipal legal advisors to me as a city councillor. I said it the last time and I'll say it again. We have upwards to $22 million of taxpayers' money that is owed to us. I cannot fathom that we would sit here with such arrogance to think that we ourselves, without the help of those who are on the front line of this file, through this CCRA process, the legal counsel that's been retained through a very thorough vetting, would not be there to represent our interests. So far, we have spent $225,000, as has been repeated many, many times in the last half hour. And with this additional $75,000, we aren't even anywhere close to an nth of 1% of the $22 million that's owed to us. So, Council, I ask that we not defer this. If you feel you want more information, that should be a separate matter. That's fine. But Friday is January 27th. That's 4 days from now. And I would not want to diddle around and then have to have a special meeting on Thursday night to do what we already know we need to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to defer? All in favor of the motion to defer? Opposed to the motion to defer?
Recorded vote, please.
It's failed. The motion's failed. So we're on the main motion now. So we've asked a lot of questions already, Council. Do councillors have any questions left in the main motion? Councillor Bruni?
To maybe satisfy all parties, can we do a friendly amendment? For instance, maybe reduce the 75,000 to 50,000? And just to give you an example, the last time we gave $50,000 was in August 2016, which is basically a 6-month carryover. Do we lower that amount to 50,000? That might cover us for the next 3-4 months.
Who is the mover and the seconder on that motion? The main motion? Yeah, the main motion.
Butland and Myers.
So, Butland and Myers. So is that a friendly amendment to Butland and Myers, reducing the ask from 75 to 50?
Implications again, I'd just like to know the implications.
The
How does
implication is
staff
going to be
feel?
is they'll have to be back here if they go through the 50.
How many more times do you want to keep looking at the scab? Fine.
Okay, so it's a friendly
Fine.
amendment, so the motion's been amended by the mover and seconder to reduce the quantum from 75 to 50. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion's carried. Okay, so we are on item 8 in our agenda.
8.1.
So Councillor Shoemaker's not in the chamber, and this was his motion, and I'm sure he'd want to.
Yeah, no, I'll talk on that also. That's out there.
Which one are you, what are you talking about, Councillor Bruni? Are we on 8? We're on 8. Are you on 8?
8?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're done the consent agenda now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm on third line in People's Road.
Okay, so actually, we'll just start at 8.1 because Councillor Shoemaker's back here now.
Oh, but he was out.
A motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Butland, whereas David Orzay recently stepped down from his position as MPP for Sault Ste. Marie and Minister of Correctional Services and Community Safety for the Province of Ontario, and whereas Minister Orzay has served as MPP for Sault Ste. Marie since 2003, having also served in 3 cabinet portfolios, and whereas prior to becoming MPP, Minister Orzay served 2 terms on City Council as councillor for Ward 1, and whereas Minister Orzay has a long list of achievements that have helped Sault Ste. Marie, including a new Sault Area Hospital, an independent Algoma University, renewal of the Sault College and Algoma U campuses, new schools built in Sault Ste. Marie, and innumerable other achievements. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the City of Sault Ste. Marie express to David Orzay their immense gratitude for his commitment and dedication to our community and province.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No real shock to anybody here that we want to, or I'm hoping that this council will thank Minister Orzay for his service to our community. Served on council, as the resolution says. I had the good fortune of working for him as a summer student for a number of years. Got to know him very well and worked or saw his dedication to our community, but you didn't have to work closely with him, I don't think, to see how dedicated he was to our community. It shows anywhere you look. I've listed a couple of things in there. Obviously, the new Sault Area Hospital and the independent Algoma U, I think, were major milestones of his tenure as our MPP. But I could have listed, another 30, and there'd be 30 beyond that achievements. So just a thank you and a best wishes to him in his new endeavors, and hopefully unanimous support on this would be great.
I agree. Any other comments? I think everybody's in favor, Councillor Shoemaker, and we all recognize the significant contribution Mr. Orzay made to our community. All in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Button, did you want to speak to that, or are you just voting in favor?
I'm pleased to second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried unanimously twice. There we go. Councillor Kompotich, can you just give me a minute? I just got to go. Go ahead.
Under Agenda Item 8.2, a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Hollingsworth, whereas the city website provides the opportunity to give additional information to city residents in a quick and accessible way, and whereas many residents have an interest in how the city is spending its money, and whereas the city is committed to being open and transparent with taxpayers about the expenses it incurs. Now therefore be it resolved that staff review and report back to council on the practicality of posting departmental budgets in an easily accessible place on the city website, as well as staff travel expenses and travel reports, and all city credit card statements with all necessary security information redacted.
Questions? Councillor Shoemaker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Have been pondering this one for a while, and a lot of municipalities post staff expenses and staff travel reports on their website. At least when I was doing my research for this motion, I could tell that many of the bigger ones post these things, and it's just an effort to be transparent. We approve travel recommendations every couple meetings, so it's all out there. It's just a matter of being able to find them, that they're easily accessible, to show people where taxpayer money is being spent. So I appreciate Councillor Hollingsworth seconding this motion. There was a recommendation from Councillor Christian that we not limit it to just posting things on the website, but that we add the words at the end, and if there's a friendly amendment that could be done, or in any other convenient format recommended by staff, as we are asking for a report here, they can, I'm hopeful that we will see this information on the website, because it's open to everyone in the community who's got internet. But if staff determines that there are other good ways to get this information out there, I think that would be a great thing to include in the report as well. So if looks like we've got agreement on that friendly amendment, and hopefully we'll have agreement on moving forward with this.
Any other questions? Yes, sir. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you. I guess to Michelle, regarding the city credit card statements, are there names on these cards?
Through you, Acting Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the city credit cards are a method of payment, and yes, there's names on them. They're under the corporation of the City of Sault Ste. Marie. I would have concerns of putting a method of payment. It's a P card. It's not just used for travel, on the city's website.
Right. Is there any other concerns? I mean, I'm all in favor of being transparent, but what I'm worried about is information going out there that should not be out there for the public to view. Is there any concerns regarding information on the staff travel expense form or travel reports or the city credit card or anything else that you want to put on the website that Councillor Shoemaker is recommending?
I think the CAO would like to address that for you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Yes, we need to understand the full gamut of it. So we recognize and understand this to be just simply a report back. So we will make sure that as part of that report, we indicate concerns over what type of information is going to be displayed where and how. The volume, the administrative volume that's going to be involved in it, the implications in terms of how many, because there's travel requests that come through council for specific to councillors, but as you could appreciate, there's a lot of travel that occurs throughout the rank and file of the organization, of the corporation. All that would be included in a report back, assuming that the motion is passed by council here tonight.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? And opposed? And is carried.
Under agenda item 8.3, 2018 budget, a motion by councillors Shoemaker and Fata, whereas on December 5, 2016, a city budget was passed containing a 4.34% levy increase for 2017. And whereas the community is facing economic anxiety due to instability in the local economy, and whereas council expects preparations for the 2018 budget to commence immediately, now therefore be it resolved that the 5 city departments, being Public Works and Engineering, Emergency Services, City Legal Department, Corporate Services, and Community Development and Enterprise Services, be directed to present to City Council 2018 preliminary budgets with a targeted decrease of no less than 1% versus their 2017 approved budgets.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Another motion that I am hopeful that we'll all support. A 1% budget reduction versus 2017 would mean about $1 million in savings that needs to be found across the 5 divisions. And as I understand from discussions that I had with, I believe it was the city clerk, any any reductions in service that would necessarily result, or if there was a reduction in service that was necessary as a result of the 1% decrease in budget, those would come to council for us to decide on one way or the other. So I know I had talked to Councillor Bruni just prior to the meeting about potentially extracting emergency services from here because of the changes in their budget that have already taken place. And I've pondered that over the last couple hours. I think since any of those, if there were any reductions that were to be that were necessary as a result of implementing this, that it would come to council. I don't know that it's that I'm amenable to a friendly amendment just for that purpose, because we'll still have to approve any reductions in service. But this is simply a way of asking the departments to look at what a 1% reduction in their budget would be versus what their numbers were last year. I know I spoke to the city solicitor earlier today on this issue, and her budget is approximately 1.7, 1.8 million. She'd have to find 17 or 18,000 in savings. So that's just one of the 5 divisions. Obviously, there are others with bigger budgets that would have to find more savings. But 1%, I think if we can find 1%, that means we're running at 99% efficiency. And if we're running at 99% efficiency, that's pretty good. And I'm hopeful that we can at least entertain this and see what a 1% reduction in budget might look like.
Okay, so we have, well, just Councillor Butland and Councillor Myers, and we'll go. Oh, do I already?
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, so I have, no, actually, that's not the list here. I've got Romano. Romano's first.
Oh, let us go ahead.
Should I bow out for a little while?
If it seems only fair, Councillor Romano, that I do go to someone else
Yeah,
here.
no, absolutely.
If I was making the list, I would not have put you first. So I'm going to overrule Councillor Compotich's list here. So it's Councillor Myers, Councillor Bruni, and then Councillor Romano. Oh, sorry, Butland, then Romano. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our Chief Financial Officer, or it might be the Deputy CEO for Public Works and Engineering. We had the example of 1% of one of our smaller divisions, probably being 17,000 of a $1.7 million budget. What would 1% be of our Public Works and Engineering division look like, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. We have to define what the 1% of budget is. Is it on the net levy for each department, or is it on their budget expenses? Because there's a significant difference there. But to give you an example of Public Works and Engineering, just on their expenses, their budget is $42.8 million. Budget meaning budget expenses, not after deducting non-tax revenue sources. If we look at the total cost for all of the individual departments that were stated, again, this is on just a budget expense level, you're just under $1 million. Now that's a $1 million decrease from the 2017 level. We haven't even considered contractual increases that are already going to be in the 2018 budget before we even start that. So the $1 million is not really a $1 million increase. You're upwards around $2 million, and then if there's other contractual increases included, as well as the potential of adding back our miscellaneous construction budget that we cut, you're close to $3 million. So it's not really a $1 million item to get to 1%. It's closer to 3.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I had this conversation earlier with our CFO and asking, because I know we used to throw around the terminology of global budgeting, and it's my understanding that to some extent we still follow a similar type of thinking in that we can't treat every division the same way, and that's why I was glad that the mover actually used the example of our legal department, because I want to go to the other extreme and use the example of our Public Works and Engineering, and this is a good winter and a good time of year to be thinking about that. So I don't think I actually heard the figure. What would 1% be of the Public Works and Engineering? Would it be about
430,000 approximately.
430,000. So I ask every one of us, if we sit here and think about trying to cut $500,000 out of our public works and engineering, sitting here in the middle of the season we're in, it's a good time to think about it. But I also wanted to ask you if you could recommend, obviously we can see where the mover wants to go with this. Is there something that I'd like to hear from staff before I would make a decision on this as to what your suggestion would be to get to where he wants to go? Obviously, what he's trying to do is start now to think about reductions that we can make in our budget. And Mr. Mayor, if I could, just a little bit of latitude in that. I guess what my real largest concern on this is, this has been through 11 budgets, is that I don't want to presuppose what our decrease could be next year. What if it could be 2% through some unknown factor that we know nothing about right now? I don't know what that could be, but my point being, I never ever want to impose on the operations side, as somebody sitting in governance, what our percentage would be to decrease or tell them how to do that. So I'd like to hear a little bit more from CFO, if I could, Mr. Mayor, if there's any other reaction to this resolution that we should be aware of. I think you just summarized something a moment ago, but the global approach versus divisions, that sort of thing.
When we do our budget, all the departments are held to other expenses being maintained at the same level as the previous year. They have to submit for any contractual increases. Salt sand would be a good example in the public works area, as well as any service level changes in which council gets as a supplementary request that they may want to consider. There's nothing wrong with setting a target, but council has to be aware that when we're looking at this sizable amount of decrease, you're talking service cuts, and that falls back on council again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting against this because I just feel that we're starting to get back down into the weeds and into the kitchen, and we're governance, and I don't presuppose what the decrease should be, if there is to be a decrease at all next year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So we have Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Shell regarding, I guess it was asked, or no, it wasn't asked, but you answered it. The 1%, would that come from the total department budget, or will it come from the levy portion? Is that council, will council decide that? Or what's the resolution, I guess, to Councillor Shoemaker? Where's this 1% coming from?
I think that question's properly to Councillor Shoemaker. What was your intention on the 1%?
The departmental expenses.
So to decrease departmental expenses by 1%?
Correct.
Okay. So departmental decrease by 1% will save approximately, what I heard and what I calculated was approximately 1%, or $1 million. No, it's not 3 million.
Just to clarify to Councillor Bruni, the 1% that Councillor Shoemaker is referring to in departmental expenses equals about a $930,000 decrease from the 2017 budget as it exists. The $3 million that I'm talking about is additional items, because we have contractual obligations that are going to automatically have increases when we go into 2017. So to get to that 1 million, say, as rounding off, decrease from the 2017, we have to add in the additional increases that we know are going to happen already.
Okay.
It's going to go up before it comes back down.
Then I do have concerns, and I did mention it to Councillor Shoemaker regarding emergency services, especially suppression, which has been reduced, manpower, and also the cost overall. Are we going to slap them with another 1% decrease? Councillor Shoemaker did mention the legal department. They're approximately 3.6 million. The levy portion is 38%, which is 1.4 million. But these are my numbers that I received. So I would find this hard to. I would find it hard to support it. I think probably a good avenue is taking this to the Finance Committee and have the Finance Committee maybe meet with each department to push us forward, and maybe the Finance Committee can come back to council with recommendations. But that's only my thought. Go.
Okay, so we have Councillor Butland next. Councillor Butland?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm very much opposed to this. It is incongruous to some discussions we had just a couple of months ago that took a year for us to get to that situation, as we were going to sit down with staff and say, look, we're concerned about expenditures and our budget and the amount of taxes, and we're interested in your input. How can you help us get to where we'd like to go? Because nobody knows better than those who are on the work for doing the jobs that we pay them to do, and they do them very well. So on one hand, we're saying we want some good ideas from you, and we're going to recognize those good ideas in some way, and we put that and we say, this is a great idea. And a couple of months later, we say, now before you come to the table, I don't know about the good ideas or any creativity, just come with a 1% reduction. They do not reconcile one another. As I say, the word incongruous keeps coming back to me. It's so out of context, and there's so much uncertainty out there. And those we've all experienced the winter vagaries in the last month or so, and people, Public Works, they wouldn't be satisfied. A 1% reduction? They say, I want the end of my driveway done. And that's $1.5 million there alone. So a 1% cut, what does that, if you're going to abdicate your responsibility, say, staff, come back with a 3% cut, and we won't have to do anything. Budget will be over. It'll be so much easier. But it's our decision to make. So just to throw it back to staff and say, you come back with a 1%. Again, it just strikes me as, over here, come back with some positive, creative ideas, and over here, before you sit down with those ideas, come with a 1% reduction. I don't know how those discussions reconcile with one another. So with all due respect, I'm sure the intentions are all very good, but as an old colleague of mine, I think his name was Moroni, said, in politics, it's so easy to make popular decisions, because I suspect the community will say, yeah, you better go for this. You better vote for this. It's a reduction. It's easy to make popular decisions, but it's often not very popular to make the right decision. This is inappropriate at this point in time. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
So we have Councillor Christian and then Councillor Romano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to CFO Shell. How long, assuming we approve this and we went back to staff and said, fine 1%, how long do you think the process would take?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, I couldn't even hazard a guess. I mean, this is something that we would have to do a year-long process. There'd have to be consultation with council. You have strategic directions that you want us to follow, and this would involve service cuts, and we would have to see how all of this falls together, and ultimately it lands with council into how we would manage this.
So would it be fair to say, I'm starting to feel like a lawyer, would it be fair to say that if we charged you with finding 1%, that you would need other inputs in order to make a reasoned decision? Because the whole idea of going to staff is because you're the experts, and we would want your opinion on what should be cut. Do you feel confident, speaking on behalf of all senior managers, that you could intelligently make a 1% cut, not knowing what lay ahead of us in the next 4 to 6 months in terms of funding and et cetera?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, maybe if council remisses back to the past 2 budgets and the type of service level changes that staff has recommended, those aren't going to change.
I understand the intent of this, this resolution. I think this is something it's maybe a few months premature. I think when the time comes, if we look at the budget and say, now we want a 1% cut, that's the time to ask. But to ask right now without knowing some of the other inputs, I think it's difficult to ask for that. And it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same show. Even if you argue that they could do it now, which I don't think they could, but they're going to come back and say this is what should be cut. You know, we're going to be left with trying to decide at this point, early on, whether we want to accept these cuts or not. So the intent is good. I mean, I understand. I still believe that when the time comes, at the right time, we should be asking staff where, you know, your professional opinion, if we had to cut, where do we cut? Just don't think now is the time. I understand that we're trying to make it a year-long process to make it easier. I just think it's a little premature at this point to ask for those specific cuts. I agree with Councillor Bruni. I think perhaps that the Finance Committee could take a more proactive role and start a dialogue with staff with the intent of moving in this direction. But to simply ask for a cut now, I think it's just a little premature. The idea is good. I think it's just a little premature.
Okay, so Councillor Romano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'll pose a question to our Public Works guru, Mr. Girardi. So the budget we just passed, the 4.34% increase, included an $820,000, I believe was the number, amount we cut from our former budget for miscellaneous road construction. What's something like that $820,000 cut going to look like given the winter we're currently experiencing and the condition of the roads right now?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, I mean, as soon as the roads, and we're seeing some of the roads exposed right now, we're seeing some of the damage that's done from the winter conditions. And this year, unfortunately, we're seeing more severe winter and then spring-like conditions in January, so it's quite an unknown. But that's the kind of stuff that does cause a lot of road damage. How's it going to affect us? Well, certainly we're not going to be able to do some work that we intended to do. And again, I think that point's been made by the CFO is the 1% cut is fine, but we're already behind the $8 million for public works. And I also remind council that I'm still $300,000 down on my equipment from the year before. So there's some challenges, and I just have to express those challenges of trying to go down, at least my department going down by 1%. That's going to be very difficult.
So in terms of, I think that might be what you were leading to, but correct me if I'm wrong, that $820,000 we cut this year out of the miscellaneous road construction budget, we specified at budget time that was supposed to go back in 2018, correct?
Correct.
They're supposed to find that. Yeah.
Right. In addition to what you would have otherwise had in your budget. Okay. We proposed to cut $97,000 or thereabouts from snowbank removal. So let's assume, now we didn't end up doing that. We were able to put that back in. What would have happened had we cut that $97,000 in the current winter conditions we have right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, certainly it'll be a challenge. I would have to run over budget because in some situations I have to remove snowbanks, but we wouldn't be able to attend to it as much as we have that opportunity now. As mentioned before, once was mentioned, it's about $80,000 to do the downtown area. There's the potential that we just wouldn't be able to respond to some of these requests.
When you make the comment that you would otherwise have to run up over budget because you have to get that done, that's because there's liability concerns with the height of the snowbanks?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Romano, in areas where there might be a safety issue, we would have to remove them, yes.
Okay. So do you feel that you could safely remove 1% from your public works budget without potentially jeopardizing public safety?
Well, through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Romano, certainly it's council's decision as to whether or not they want to remove it. There would be a service cut, as has been said by others, and you'd have to make the choice on what that service cut would be. Would I recommend it? Certainly as a department head, no.
And perhaps not just a point of order, Mr. Mayor, I noticed should we just make our comments now and conclude? And I also wanted to propose a friendly amendment.
I'd be happy if you made your comments, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Fata, and hopefully he's the last on this, but if there are any more, we'll continue on. So just make your comments while we're at you, and we're going to move on.
So perhaps to Mr. Shoemaker, first and foremost, would you consider adding, as a friendly amendment to you and to Councillor Fata, sorry, I think to Councillor Fata as a seconder, would you be prepared to consider a friendly amendment to the resolution to just follow the very end of it, provided said reduction can be done in a responsible manner that would not compromise public safety or otherwise jeopardize the ability of the corporation of the city of Sault Ste. Marie to fulfill its day-to-day mandate?
Do the mover and the seconder find that friendly?
I can repeat it. Would you like me to repeat it?
Well, I wouldn't expect that we would be brought anything that would compromise public safety, so I'm not sure that's necessary.
Okay, so...
Well, given the responses just from Mr. Girardi, I think that's...
So it doesn't seem to be accepted. Councillor Fata, do you have any comments on your motion?
Do I have any comments on this one here?
Yeah, it's your motion. You seconded it.
Yeah, no, you asked me for my input on...
Well, you had your hand up, so yeah, we're at you now.
I thought we were talking about this, not... Okay. I'm just going to touch on something here, and I'm going to do it in a delicate fashion here, but there's... let's face it, over the years, we've always heard this term, top-heavy, staff in the Ivory Castle, administrative heavy. One thing that we seem to be always shuffling around but never seem to be dealing with, and I think now whether it's done through attrition, whether it's done through, as recently the CAO brought forward some changes to as far as efficiency, whether we changed titles, changed positions, but we have to, staff has to be on board with this. When we went through this past budget, there were several recommendations such as reducing bus service on Sunday, and we got into frontline operations, and it just seems like we never get into anything that I think a lot of people out there, and I know a lot of people out there would want us to be having this conversation about. We got to deal with the issues of the administration and whether efficiencies can be found where we can have less people doing more than one job. Now, I'm not going to start telling Larry Girardi where he's supposed to look. I'm not going to tell Frank Cuccinelli where he's going to look. But the fact is, this is a discussion I think should be carried beyond this presentation here. Now, again, through attrition, through however method it's done, we seem to have this notion that we quickly replace the position, and I know that there's been times when that wasn't the case. But I think this discussion has to be had on a more serious level, rather than talking about reducing bus service or getting rid of a fountain out in the water there. I mean, we got to deal with issues that are going to be serious as far as making changes to the financial structure of this corporation. And I think this is an area that we seem to tiptoe around, but we never seem to want to delve into. No one's got tenure at City Hall. And the only time I ever heard tenure was used with teachers and maybe athletes. But the thing is, this discussion has to be had by our department heads. It has to be expected. And again, I'm not saying go out and start. I know they're not. It's not as simple. It's simple to say what I'm saying. I understand that. But through attrition or through the process of due diligence, this conversation could become a reality. I know it's something that's going to be taking place over a period of time, but we don't seem to get into this topic of creating reclassifications of duties and responsibilities, so that in the end, if someone retires, as I'm using that example, then fine, that person is not replaced. Those duties are simply passed on to 2 or 3 other members of that department. I know I can list about 7 or 8 departments, sub-departments, where that could be done. But I would expect us to have this conversation on a serious level. I would expect that the department heads to be looking at this on a serious level. And this is where we're going to get some savings, and where people expect these savings. People expect this. It's not just I'm making them on behalf of many people who have made this statement. I'm sure you've all heard that. We are top heavy. That's a belief by many, many taxpayers. So I think this discussion of saving 1% per department. We're not talking about buying less paper. We're talking about doing something that seriously affects the bottom line of this corporation. Thank you very much.
Councillor Compadich?
Thanks, Mayor Provenzano. And just a quick comment on the importance of going forward and identifying all the cost savings and efficiencies in all the departments, and including the department heads and the CAO and all of us and the employees. We'll keep identifying, and hopefully we'll be able to relay them back to the ratepayers of the municipality. I mean, after all, we're all in it together, and we're all doing what we can to lower the costs in a safe way and an efficient way of doing so. So maybe through tech change and attrition, like Councillor Fata had mentioned, maybe there's a possibility that that could happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Romano?
So just in terms of summary, this feels a lot like, and I think we've had a couple motions before, notices of motion that turned into resolutions that my friend to my left here has brought forward. This seems like an indirect way of getting at the same method that some of those prior ones that had to do specifically with public works were brought forward. We just had a real difficult budget year. 4.34% increase. Is certainly the worst one that we've been a part of, and it sounds like it was the worst one for some many years.
It wasn't.
But
just be factual, because I'll send you the numbers in an email tomorrow, because it wasn't.
All right. Well, fair enough. It's certainly larger than any we've seen, and certainly I've seen in my term. It's only been 2 years. I would happily agree to pursue the resolution or vote in favor of the resolution if in fact that friendly amendment were added to it. I don't see how a further reduction or a request for a reduction of 1% through all of these various departments is going to be in any way productive. I don't think we're looking at anything other than potentially jeopardizing safety concerns that ultimately, at the end of the day, just using the few examples, Public Works is going to end up having to go over budget anyways, because it can't impose those kind of cuts and not look at replenishing those things and doing those things that would otherwise become a liability to the city and a safety threat to the public. I think some of what this council started to do, I look at the mayor's resolution earlier in the year, 2016, on an employee innovation program. That's a way to look at efficiencies, generating further revenue. A continuous improvement fund, something I've harped on for some time. I think those are the types of things that are going to generate further revenue, find more efficiencies. That's how we're going to get further ahead. I think looking at things like attrition is a very smart way to also look at circumstances that could reduce our costs. But I mean, to use, when we passed that budget, I know Councillor Shoemaker was with Mr. Paikin and Mr. Davis, former Premier of Ontario, and I was reading the book, and there's a very good saying that Bill Davis used prior to becoming the leader of his respective party, where he said that simple answers to complex questions may make headlines, but they do not make sound public policy. So I think we have to bear those types of things in mind.
Okay, so I'm gonna end this actually, Council. A couple comments I want to make. I've heard about 4.34 now for a number of months, and I think we do ourselves a great disservice when we do that. We all do ourselves a disservice. Our increase was 2.8. And I recognize that in the end it's a 4.3 increase, but we have to recognize that there are bodies outside of this chamber that have budgets that affect us. So we keep on using this number to our own detriment, because we worked really hard to get to 2.8. And our staff brought us numbers that would have got us lower, but the appetite wasn't here to make those cuts. My feeling is that we've come a long way in a very short period of time. Last year we did 2 budgets, and now we budget at the end of the year, and we have plenty of time to look at our budgets. And I think Councillor Butlin's point is very valid. We've started a number of programs now to try and engage the staff and get advice from them. We have a gapping program where they're not immediately posting jobs. We have a vacancy management plan where they look at jobs when they come due, Councillor Fata. So like, if you were to sit back and listen to this conversation in isolation or in a vacuum, you would think that nothing was done or nothing's been done. And that's a disservice to us, who have worked very hard on this, but it's also a disservice to our senior staff, who have worked very hard on this. So like, I agree with the spirit of Councillor Shoemaker's motion. We've got to keep on looking, and we've got to do our best to make sure that we have the lowest possible levy increase, if there is one at all. I just think it's difficult at this time, this far out, to put a specific number on it. And all that will happen, essentially, is the same thing that happened last year, which is they'll come to us and say, okay, if you want to go down to 1%, you've got to take this off, you've got to take this off, and you've got to take this off. And they're going to propose cuts to us that we would have to make. And my feeling is that we've got a number of senior staff working right now. We've got them working in the right direction. We've got some good programs going on. And as we budget throughout the year and as we get ready for the budget, we can look at these things as we get closer to mid or end of the year. So in principle, I would agree with the spirit of the motion, but in application, I don't think it's the right time for it, so I wouldn't support it in that respect. But Councillor Shoemaker has asked for a recorded vote on it, so we will have one of those. Madam Clerk, if you could have a recorded vote on this, please.
Councillor Butland?
Opposed.
Councillor Myers?
Opposed.
Councillor Bruni?
For.
Councillor Nero?
Against?
Councillor Romano?
Opposed.
Councillor Shoemaker?
For.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Opposed.
Councillor Kupanen?
Opposed.
Councillor Kompotich?
Opposed.
Councillor Christian?
Against.
Councillor Fata?
For.
Councillor Turco?
Against.
And Mayor Provenzano?
Against. So that brings us to item 8.4 on our agenda, Madam Clerk.
Motion by Councillors Bruni and Fata, whereas Third Line has had a very large increase in traffic, both commercial and residential, and whereas the intersection of Third Line and People's Road has become a very busy intersection with continual backup traffic and frustrated drivers, and whereas this intersection will probably continue to increase in traffic from all directions, resulting in more frustrated drivers and more traffic accidents. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to report to Council with a report on possible changes to the current status of this intersection that may very well get worse if nothing is done, that is four-way stop signs.
Councillor Bruni, I believe this is your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
I'll just give a little bit of brief history. I received a police report for the last 3 years, and at the corner in 2014, 3 accidents occurred. 2015, 4 accidents occurred, and 2016, 4 accidents, for a total of 11 accidents occurred in 3 years. The collision occurrence is between 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So those are basically the busiest times there's traffic at that corner. And also the collision days are between, it occurred on Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays. So there's not a specific day that these collisions occur. They do occur basically every day. The majority of the collisions occur because of improper turns and fail to yield right away. Also in the report, there was a total of 22 vehicles, and 90% of the accidents occurred when conditions were clear. The study stated dry weather, wet weather, loose snow, and packed snow. The majority was on dry weather. So when the conditions are all perfect and the accidents are still occurring, I think it's something that we have to look into to see what we can do. I know I've spoken to the traffic department in the last 3-4 years, and Councillor Fata has been a councillor longer than I have, and we have brought this concern up to PWT and the traffic department, and we basically get the response that it meets the criteria and there's nothing that can be done. So I did ask the individual, what can I do? He said, bring a resolution on the floor. So that's what we did. Now, at the intersection of People's Road and Third Line East, we have 3 major companies. We have Anthony's, Rione Construction, and Superior Manufacturing. And also included in that little area, there are 5 other businesses that use that area for storage. You have the service rental, O'Dane Reload, Fiber Stick Manufacturing, Raker Hydraulics, and Double Eagle. So there is plenty of traffic. There's lots of transports. It is a transport route. So what can we do what can city staff do for us? We're just asking for some type of recommendations to come back to council or come back to Councillor Fata and myself. I know there's a couple options. Traffic lights could be possible. Four-way stop. Definitely a little bit of education with signs on both sides. One of the problems that we have on People's Road is there's a lane that when you're going north on People's Road, you're making a right-hand turn on third line east. Well, there's 2 lanes there, but with the snow right now, the lanes are basically reduced. So sometimes people stay on the right-hand side and they decide to go straight. So I think a little bit of education, maybe some signage is appropriate. I know at the corner of Third Line and People's Road on the northeast side, there are cedar trees. I don't know if it's city property. I don't know if it's privately owned, but I've asked, Councillor Fata and I have asked many times, can we get these trees, I'm not saying removed, but at least reduced, trimmed. This way the visibility, part of the problem is vehicles when they're traveling Third Line east going west, they get into the intersection of People's Road and they're peeking. They're looking out to see if any vehicles are coming down from Fourth Line. That has caused some problems. And the way they put the lines on the road, and that was a concern that Councillor Fat and I have brought forward, that the lines aren't out further, so cars are passing where the cross line goes, so they're going over it. So we're asking city staff to come back with some type of report, provide us with some options, and if that's not the case, we have to go out to a consultant, but I don't want to go through a consultant because it costs money. So I'm hoping city staff can come back with some type of recommendations. And that's it.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. Do you have to add to that, Councillor Fata?
Was it?
Okay. Because I think if you're asking for a report, I strongly suspect you'll get the favor of council, but if you want to keep on arguing for it, then you
Well, no, I'm just going to, 30 seconds.
Go ahead.
Okay, this location compares, in my opinion, compares very, very much to the corner of Second Line and Black Road. We went ahead and put lights there, okay? This difference, though, between this location and Black Road and Second Line is that we got a large industrial property right across the street. So basically, there's four-way traffic, and there's a lot of frustration on that intersection, and it's coming from the commercial industrial as well as the residents. And I'm going to tell you, Third Line has become a thoroughfare for buses and large transport vehicles. All those people are taking Third Line. They come to that intersection. I think it's really imperative that we look into this seriously and make some kind of change.
All in favor? Carried. There you go, Councillor Fata. That was persuasive. We're on 8.5. Free parking for Shadows on the Mind Film Festival. We'll have the clerk read the motion. Councillor Neer, if you'd like to speak to it, you can, and then we'll vote on it.
A motion by Councillors Nero and Turco, whereas the Shadows of the Mind Film Festival runs from Monday, February 27 to Sunday, March 5, 2017. And whereas the Shadows of the Mind Film Festival is a film festival that showcases films and other art forms for two purposes: to entertain and educate. By attracting audiences through the entertainment value of film, the film festival uses select films and events to increase awareness and education on mental health and addiction issues, as well as other prevalent social topics as decided each year. And whereas the Shadows of the Mind Film Festival is a not-for-profit organization, and whereas the primary venue for the film festival is the Grant Theatre, and whereas on some days during the week the film festival will have film and panel discussions from 9 a.m. to midnight, and whereas many patrons of the film festival attend in the morning and stay for the entire day, having lunch and dinner in the downtown area, Now therefore be it resolved that the 2-hour daily parking limit be waived at the Brock Albert parking lot to permit full free parking from Monday, February 27, 2017 to Friday, March 3, 2017 during the week of the Shadow of the Mind Film Festival.
Councillor Nero.
Resolution is last year, Mr. Mayor, and it is a 2-hour limit. A lot of people spend all day at this, and so we waived it last year, and we're asking the same thing this year.
Thank you. Councillor Shoemaker, you have a comment on this?
Yes, thank you. Just a reminder, since we're talking parking, the Parking Review Committee has a survey that it published today that it's asking the community to get to and complete. So since we're already talking about parking, I figured it was a good opportunity to remind everyone.
Is that on our website?
Do the survey. I believe it is on our website. There was a press release that went out today, so it should be on the local media tomorrow.
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you.
All in favor? Carried. Bylaws?
Under agenda item 11, a motion by Councillors Butland and Romano that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date January 23, 2017 be approved.
So we'll change that to Butland and Christian. Because Councillor Romano's left. All in favor? Carried.
And I have a motion by Councillors Butland and Compotich resolved that this council proceed into closed session to discuss the proposed acquisition of property in the west end of the city.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Council. Well, we have to motion to adjourn. Madam Clerk?
Motion by Councillors Christian and Romano that this council now adjourn.
All in favor?
I'll put Compotich.